All right. All right. All right. Welcome back to the live show. You know what time it is? It is your boy Genesis. It is currently 4:25 a.m. and of course today's date is the 20th of August 2025. We are back for another one. It's early morning. For some people it's like probably an hour past midnight, but I am in the south, so it is 4:25 a.m. And yeah, I know, should be in bed. But we're gonna do nightcap real fast. Real fast. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Genesis Show. Today we're gonna check out Press Secretary Caroline Levitt, of course, the youngest press secretary. We're gonna check her out, and she lays out some really important um, information here in this press conference they had here a couple of hours ago. And then after that, we're going to check out subsequently what's going on concerning Ukraine and Russia. So, ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, enjoy the show. Don't forget, this is the United States. This is not the divided state, whether you are a Republican or a Democrat. It really doesn't matter. What matters is you are an American and you love the United States. Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, one thing is for sure, you love the United States. So why would you dislike people on the other side, people who are not in your party? So sit back, be nice, and here we go.
What we've witnessed President Trump accomplish over the last few days has been nothing short of remarkable. We are now 3.5 years into the war between Russia and Ukraine, a brutal conflict that has claimed hundreds of thousands of Russian and Ukrainian lives and cost trillions of dollars. The weakness and incompetence of Joe Biden foolishly allowed the killing to start in the first place. Until President Trump returned to office in January, the bloody and broken Biden status quo was to endlessly force American taxpayers to fund Ukraine no matter the cost, no matter how long it takes, and no matter how many lives were lost. There is no denying that Biden's America Last foreign policy moved the world further away from peace. President Trump rejected that failed approach and instead, over the last 7 months, has relentlessly pursued peace throughout his second term. And thanks to President Trump's efforts, we finally have movement after years of deadly gridlock. On Friday, as you all know, many of you were there, President Trump hosted Russian President Vladimir Putin in Anchorage, Alaska, for a bilateral meeting. This was the first time President Putin has been to the United States since 2015, and the first time he has met with an American president in years. President Putin publicly confirmed what President Trump has said all along. The war between Russia and Ukraine never would have started in the first place if President Trump were in office. This was always obvious to any person with a shred of common sense. Just look at what took place during the last 4 administrations. Under George W. Bush, Russia invaded Georgia. Under Barack Obama, Russia took Crimea. Under Joe Biden, Russia invaded Ukraine. But under President Trump, Russia did not invade nor take anything. President Trump is the only president this century, Republican or Democrat, who has held Russia in check and ensured peace in Europe. That's because Russia has always greatly respected President Trump and his peace through strength foreign policy approach. But overall, the bilateral talks in Alaska were very productive, and multiple key points were agreed to between the two leaders that truly opened up the door for Phase 2 discussions, which took place yesterday here at the White House, within 48 hours of that meeting in Anchorage, I may add. As you all know, there were many European leaders here, as well as Ukrainian President Zelensky. They all traveled here to meet with President Trump to maintain the momentum and work toward a lasting peace. Across the board, every leader credited President Trump for his decisive leadership that has reignited the dialogue in hopes of finally bringing this war to a peaceful conclusion. Two quotes in particular capture the progress that was made and the optimism moving forward. Finnish President Alexander Stubb said, "I think in the past 2 weeks, we've probably had more progress in ending this war than we have had in the past 3.5 years. Again, that is the president of Finland, a country that shares a border with Russia. That's what we call the President Trump effect. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte also summed it up well. Without President Trump, this deadlock with Putin would not have been broken. He is the only one who could do this. Following the encouraging conversations yesterday, President Trump spoke with President Putin by phone, and he agreed to begin the next phase of the peace process, a meeting between President Putin and President Zelensky, which would be followed, if necessary, by a trilateral meeting between President Putin, President Zelensky, and President Trump. As the president said, Vice President Vance, Secretary Rubio, and Special Envoy Witkoff will continue to coordinate with Russia and Ukraine to make this happen as soon as possible. It's very important to remember that before President Trump's landslide victory last November, there was no end in sight to this bloodshed. Now there may finally be light at the end of the tunnel and an opportunity for lasting peace. That's because President Trump is the peace president, and American leadership is back on the world stage. It should not be lost on anyone in this room that world leaders are coming right here to Washington, D.C. for help. While previous presidents have traveled halfway around the world to apologize for America, President Trump stands up for America, and he has firmly restored America's status as the undisputed leader of the free world. However, one thing that has absolutely not changed is the media's negative and downright false coverage of President Trump and his foreign policy accomplishments. From the beginning of this entire process, much of the left-wing media has been actively rooting against the President of the United States in the pursuit of peace. Initially, the media ridiculously claimed that President Trump was somehow beholden to Russia for even agreeing to have a face-to-face discussion with President Putin inside of the United States. The media said President Trump was making a grave mistake by, quote, legitimizing Putin. They were aghast that President Trump would treat another world leader like a world leader. The media relentlessly attacked President Trump and claimed he suffered a, quote, major defeat for not immediately emerging with a final agreement, even though he said heading into that meeting, this was a meeting to listen and to understand how to move the ball forward. All weekend following those historic U.S.-Russia bilateral talks, we listened to clueless pundits on television trying but failing to claim that the president had failed. The so-called experts in the foreign policy establishment, whose record is nothing but endless wars, trillions of wasted taxpayer dollars, and dead Americans, have the nerve to try and lecture President Trump, who has solved 7 global conflicts in 7 months, about peace. This is the same president, by the way, who brokered the Abraham Accords in his first term, on top of more than half a dozen other peace deals this year alone, as I just said. We also saw yesterday the president of Ukraine and all of the other major leaders of Europe fly across the Atlantic Ocean to meet President Trump at the White House because of the progress that was made, and that, if you ask the media, failed meeting, but it was not. It was highly productive and it was successful. This is why Americans' trust in the mass media is at a lowest point in more than 5 decades. Diplomacy is a delicate process, and instead of reporting the facts about what is happening here at this White House and what is happening between this president and other leaders around the world, many outlets in this room continue to try to actively undermine the president and sabotage the efforts towards peace. That is why I felt the need to set the record straight. In other news, on the home front, President Trump's efforts to make D.C. safe again are working. There have been a total of 465 arrests since the start of this operation on Thursday, August 7th. Last night, there were a total of 52 arrests, including the arrest of an illegal alien MS-13 gang member with convictions for DWI and drug possession. Thanks to President Trump's leadership and the outstanding work of both federal and local law enforcement, dangerous gang members like the one picked up last night will not be allowed on the streets of our nation's capital. Other arrests last night included assault with a deadly weapon for stabbing, parole violation for robbery, murder, outstanding warrant for attempted murder, assault on federal law enforcement officer, and felony assault. 4 more homeless encampments were also removed during yesterday's reporting period. To date, a total of 48 homeless encampments have been cleared in Washington, D.C. by multi-agency teams. MPD patrol units are actively working with city officials to locate and clear additional encampments and remove homeless residents off of Washington's streets. And despite fake narratives from the media, again, a significant number of the arrests have been in high crime areas of D.C. In fact, nearly half of all of the non-illegal alien-related arrests have occurred in wards 7 and 8. The 2 wards that have the highest number of violent crime, as well as homicides and assaults with dangerous weapons last year. So while Democrats continue to coddle violent criminals, President Trump and this administration are focused on putting them behind bars and unapologetically standing up for the safety of law-abiding American citizens. And the White House will continue to provide all of you with the results of this operation in the days ahead. So with that, I will take your questions today. Here in our new media seat today, we have Jack Posobiec, who joined us in Anchorage, Alaska last week. Jack, thanks for being here. Why don't you kick us off?
Caroline, thanks so much. So a couple of questions regarding the status of these peace talks. Obviously, we saw the President and President Putin there in Anchorage. We saw the world leaders here yesterday with this summit. We've heard phrases like coalition of the willing. We've also heard Article 5-like guarantees. When it comes to the security guarantees, what is the current status of that? I know the President earlier today mentioned boots on the ground would be UK, France, Germany possibly, but unequivocally said no U.S. troops on the ground, but U.S. coordination. Can you elaborate on that, and what would the red lines be?
Sure. Well, you got to the heart of what I was going to say to all of you today on security guarantees, which is the President has definitively stated U.S. boots will not be on the ground in Ukraine, but we can certainly help in the coordination and perhaps provide other means of security guarantees to our European allies. The President understands security guarantees are crucially important to ensure a lasting peace, and he has directed his national security team to coordinate with our friends in Europe and also to continue to cooperate and discuss these matters with Ukraine and Russia as well.
Caroline, now, have the Russians responded at all? I know we spoke with President Putin last night. What has been their response? Because we've heard some reports from the Kremlin and others saying they're unequivocally against NATO troops on the ground.
Well, look, the President continues to have these conversations with both leaders. Those conversations took place in Anchorage, Alaska, again yesterday with the Europeans and President Zelensky, and he has directed his team to come up with a framework for these security guarantees that can be acceptable to help ensure a lasting peace and end this war.
And then just last question real quick on this. Regarding some of the funding, we're hearing questions about another round of weapons sales or possibly a round of U.S. purchases of Ukrainian drones. Will that money be funded by the U.S. taxpayers? Are we finally going to see an end to the U.S. taxpayer-funded, seemingly endless mandate for these foreign wars?
Well, the President is very sensitive to the needs of the American taxpayer, and immediately upon entering office back in January, he made it very clear that we're not going to continue writing blank checks to fund a war very far away, which is why he came up with the very creative solution to have NATO purchase American weaponry, because it is the best in the world, and then to backfill the needs of the Ukrainian army and the Ukrainian people and their military. So that's the solution the President has came up with. We'll continue to see that forward. As for any additional sales, I'll have to defer you to the Department of Defense.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jack. Kelly.
What has President Trump learned that tells him that Vladimir Putin would be willing to make a deal for him, for President Trump?
Well, the President has learned a lot, which is part of the reason he opened up this dialogue. The previous administration, who oversaw the beginning of this war, refused to talk. And President Trump has always said, in order to learn, in order to move the ball forward with diplomacy and towards peace, you have to have open dialogue. And so that's why the President has had several conversations by phone and, of course, an in-person meeting last Friday with President Putin. He also has talked to President Zelensky dozens of times, had him here at the White House yesterday, and he's understanding what both sides want, what both sides are going to have to give up. And he has always said, in order to get a good deal, both sides are going to have to walk away a little bit unhappy. So he continues to learn a lot throughout these conversations, which is why we've seen progress from both sides. And I would also just add, when it comes to learning and moving the ball forward, look at how both Russia and Ukraine have actually talked directly for the first time in many years, thanks to the efforts of this president and this administration.
Specifically for President Trump, though, what do you think Putin's motivation is to try to do something for President Trump? as opposed to just resolving the conflict?
I think, as I just spoke to in my opening remarks, Kelly, Russia and all countries around this world actually respect the United States again. And the president is using the might of American strength to demand that respect from our allies, our friends, our adversaries all around the world. And we've seen that not just lead to progress with Russia and Ukraine, but also we've seen it in the closing of 7 global conflicts around the world as well. We've seen it with the release of hostages in Gaza. You've seen it with the end of the conflict between India and Pakistan, which could have resulted in a nuclear war if we had not had a president who believed in the strength and the leverage that comes with the job of being the president of the United States of America. Rachel.
Thanks, Caroline. Heading into Alaska, a lot of the focus in the talk was on this trilateral meeting between these 3 leaders. Can you explain how this went from a trilateral meeting involving President Trump to now the focus being on this bilateral meeting without the president first?
Well, look, the president has spoken to both leaders about this, and both leaders have expressed a willingness to sit down with each other. And so our national security team will help both countries do that. Ultimately, the president has always said that there are areas of disagreement in this war that will have to be discussed and decided upon by these 2 countries. And so he wants these 2 countries to engage in direct diplomacy. He's said that from the very beginning, which is why he's agreeable to the idea of having President Zelensky and President Putin get together. And I understand accommodations for that meeting are underway. As soon as we hear more details, we'll be sure to let all of you know.
And just a quick follow-up. We know as of right now there is no ceasefire in place. We've seen Russia continue its attacks on Ukraine. What indications is the president getting from Putin that he wants to have this meeting with Zelensky soon?
Because he spoke to him directly yesterday.
And he expressed that
Haley,
sooner rather than later.
He spoke to that directly yesterday, and the president put that in his statement that he gave to all of you, the news media, knowing you'd be asking following that conversation in the effort of transparency. Haley.
Hey, thanks, Caroline. You made clear no U.S. boots on the ground. Is the president considering U.S. boots in the air as a form of a security guarantee?
Look, that was something the president mentioned on his interview this morning. It is an option and a possibility. I won't certainly rule out anything as far as military options that the president has at his disposal. I'll let him do that. I can tell you he's definitively ruled out boots on the ground. Sure.
Thanks, Tara. Just about the possible venue for the talks, can you confirm that Putin suggested Moscow as a venue for the bilateral talks? And if so, doesn't that indicate that Putin is perhaps not serious about this, that he's suggesting a venue that there's no way that Zelensky is going to go to?
Look, I'm not going to litigate the private conversations between the president and President Putin, aside from what the president himself has already spoken on. But I can tell you there are many options that are being discussed by our national security team right now with both parties.
Can you give us an indication of where?
I just told you we'll provide you details as soon as we can. Thank you for trying, though. Libby.
Thank you, Caroline. I wanted to ask about the National Guard troops. How is the White House coordinating with how they're being placed in D.C., what areas? And then also, how long should people here in the district anticipate the National Guard to be on the ground patrolling the streets?
I don't have a timeline for you, Libby, but we will keep you posted on that. I think the president, as you know, and this administration, he came to this briefing room with members of his cabinet to lay out the Gallatin Police Department to make our district safer. We've seen violent crime has taken the lives of far too many residents here in our nation's capital, and the president wants to make it safe again. And as for the coordination efforts, this interagency team is meeting and talking daily. In fact, there's a meeting taking place right now in the West Wing with members of the interagency task force to continue to discuss not just the National Guard deployment, but also how we can continue to remove public safety threats off of the streets of Washington, which, as the numbers I just showed you prove, they are doing every single night. I will just reiterate, 465 total arrests and counting since the start of this operation. I believe 11 or 12 days ago. I'll have to check the calendar, but those are pretty remarkable results. If not for this task force and their high level of coordination and the leadership of this president, there would have been 465 more violent criminals on the streets of this capital that you all live in every day. So I think we should all be very grateful for that. Stephen.
Thank you, Caroline. 3 questions about the D.C. crackdown.
Sure.
First, I was wondering if you could clarify something President Trump said. He mentioned getting rid of the slums where criminals live. Was he talking about tents or permanent residential buildings? And then the mayor has expressed an interest in clarifying how much of a focus illegal immigration enforcement is as part of this crackdown. Can you say anything about that?
Sure.
And third, any preview on the beautification?
3 questions. I'll try to answer all 3 of them pointedly for you. First, when it comes to what you said, and the president said, the slums of Washington, D.C., he's referring to the most dangerous communities, neighborhoods, and streets in this city where, unfortunately, violence has ravaged these communities and taken the lives of, again, far too many law-abiding D.C. residents. We know on July 5th of this year, just more than a month ago, a 3-year-old beautiful young girl was shot and killed in her car with her family in one of these communities, which is why there has been a surge, despite what many of you have been falsely reporting. And I believe it was the Washington Post who put out a map claiming it to be fact-based when it was just based on, I don't know, accounts that they've heard on the street, not actual statistics and data. So we went and reconfigured the numbers, and as I said, nearly half of all the non-illegal alien-related arrests have occurred in wards 7 and 8 in the District of Columbia, where we know, excuse me, there's the highest rate of crime. So we'll continue to do that. And what was your second question, Stephen?
Legal immigration, how much of a focus that is?
Yeah, look, I mean, the focus is to make D.C. safe and beautiful and to remove public safety threats and violent criminals from our streets. If federal law enforcement, with the help of the Metropolitan Police Department, come across illegal aliens, of course, we are going to abide by this administration's policy of law and order, and we are going to remove illegal criminals from our nation's capital. They will be detained and deported, just like they are in every other community across the country. Kristen.
First question is, whose idea was it to change the next steps from a trilateral to a bilateral meeting?
It was an idea that evolved in the course of the president's conversations with both President Putin, President Zelensky, and the European leaders yesterday. And as you saw, Kristen, with all of those European leaders leaving the White House, including the NATO Secretary General, they all agreed that this is a great first step. And it's a good thing that these 2 leaders are going to be sitting down together, and the president expects that to happen.
And how long is Trump willing to wait and operate in good faith for Putin to actually arrange a meeting before he intervenes?
Look, the president has put tremendous public pressure to bring this war to a close. He's taken actions, as you've seen, sanctions on India and other actions as well. He's made himself very clear that he wants to see this war end, and he has scoffed at the ideas of others that have been raised that we should wait another month before any meeting takes place. The president wants to move, and he wants to bring this war to an end as quickly as possible.
Just a clarification on something you said earlier about Putin agreeing to the meeting. The Kremlin seemed to indicate that Putin did not firmly agree to a bilateral. Did he agree to have a sit-down with just Zelensky on the phone?
I can assure you that the United States government and the Trump administration is working with both Russia and Ukraine to make that bilateral happen as we speak. Sean.
Hey, if the point is to get everybody on the same page, why wouldn't Trump just take the call from Putin while the other leaders were in the room? He said it would be disrespectful to do that. But why is it disrespectful?
With all due respect, only a reporter from the New York Times would ask a question like that, Sean. The president met with all of these European leaders at the White House 48 hours after sitting down with President Putin on American soil. In fact, there was so much progress in the readout that was given to these European leaders immediately following his meeting with President Putin that every single one of them got on a plane 48 hours later and flew to the United States of America. And if I could just read for all of you some of the statements from those European leaders yesterday, you had President Zelensky himself saying it was a very good conversation. It was really good. We spoke about very sensitive points. The Secretary General, Mark Rutte, it was the president, only because of the president, that this deadlock was broken, but with President Putin by starting a dialogue. So these leaders, who this war is in their backyard, are very grateful that the president took that call and that he was there to provide them with a readout of Russia's thinking on this, something that was not done by the previous administration at all. Catherine.
Thank you. Is the White House looking at Budapest as a possible location?
I'm not going to confirm or deny locations. We'll provide you with details as soon as we can.
Just following up on Kristen's question, I understand that the White House is working and allies are working to make this meeting happen, but did Putin promise to do a meeting with Zelensky, a direct meeting, in the coming weeks?
He has, and I just answered that question for you. Franco.
Thanks. I just want to clarify So you are saying that President Trump is considering U.S. pilots and U.S. aircraft potentially supporting European or Ukrainian forces?
The president spoke to that himself this morning when he called into Fox and Friends, and I would defer you to his answer. You can read it directly yourself.
In addition, can I ask, no boots on the ground, Steve Witkoff's talking about Article 5-like security guarantees. Can you talk about what other Article 5-like security guarantees that are being considered if it's not boots on the ground?
These are very sensitive diplomatic discussions that are currently taking place literally as we speak. So I will leave it to the national security team, and I'll leave it to the president to have those private discussions with these leaders as we try to bring this war to an end.
And can I ask one
Mary
more?
Margaret, go ahead.
Thanks, Caroline. 2 questions, if that's okay. So on these meetings, I know you said that the trilateral will take place if necessary. Do you think that we might not need the trilateral and that Zelensky and Putin might come to this conclusion on their own? And then as a follow-up, I know the president said on Fox News this morning that he's partially seeking peace in order to get to heaven. Was he joking, or is there spiritual motivation behind his peace deals here?
I think the president was serious. I think the president wants to get to heaven, as I hope we all do in this room as well. Annie.
Thanks, Caroline. I'm just shifting gears to the Department of Justice for a minute. Can you walk us through why another deputy FBI director was named? Does Trump have any displeasure with how the FBI has been being run to date? And I have a question about the antitrust division.
No, Andrew Bailey is extremely qualified. As you know, he's been serving with honor as the Attorney General of Missouri, and he's been brought on as another set of very credible and experienced hands to work alongside the current Deputy Director, Dan Bongino, under the leadership of the Director, Kash Patel, and the Attorney General, Pam Bondi. And the FBI has been doing a tremendous job. We've seen their agents out on the streets as part of this interagency task force here in Washington. But the crime that they've been stopping here in Washington, they've been doing this for 7 months all across the country. In fact, there's been 19,000 arrests by the FBI nationwide. That's more than double last year in the same time period. Of those, 1,600 arrests were for violent crimes against children. 4,000 child victims have been rescued by this FBI under this current leadership. 1,000 arrests from investigations of foreign terrorist organizations. There's been 1,500 kilos of fentanyl seized. 6,300 kilos of meth have been seized, and 3 of the top 10 most wanted have been arrested so far. Not a single one of the individuals on the top 10 most wanted list were arrested under the previous administration. We've arrested 3 in 7 months. So when you're actually working and enforcing law and order, you need all hands on deck. And so we look forward to welcoming Andrew Bailey to this new post. Jackie.
I have a quick question about Roger Alfred, who's a former DOJ official. He gave a speech in Aspen yesterday where he said that senior DOJ aides are cutting deals with favored lobbyists. I'm wondering if the president has any concerns at all with the way the antitrust division is working.
I have no idea who that individual is. I don't know why he made those comments. I don't know what basis he's making those comments on. My instinct tells me it's not true, but we will definitely look into them, and I'll get you a response.
Thank you, Caroline.
Jackie.
Thanks, Caroline. Since the president often says that this war would not have started if he were in office, and Putin confirmed that.
It's true. Do you accept that as true? The European leaders do.
Well,
and President Putin himself said that, by the way.
He did say that. The question I have, though, is what is the president going to do to ensure that these security guarantees last beyond him into the time when he is no longer president? And does that have to involve Congress at all?
Well, he understands the need for that, which he spoke to yesterday. And what's he going to do? It's why he's engaging in so many talks and so many conversations with both sides of this war with our European allies. It's why on the way home from Anchorage, Alaska, very late at night, when I know many of you on the press plane were sleeping and many staff were sleeping, the president himself was still awake at 2 o'clock in the morning talking to European leaders and NATO about how we can ensure a lasting peace and bring this conflict to an end. He has expended an incredible amount of time, energy, and effort into bringing this war to an end, and he remains determined to do that.
Also, can I ask you about the
Thank
you, Caroline.
DC crime?
Sure, Jake, and then to your right.
All right. Thank you, Caroline. Which of the half-dozen peace deals that the president's pulled off would you say he's the most proud of? And then I have another question.
That's a good question, Jake. I'll leave that to the president to answer. I think he's proud of all of the peace deals that he's been able to achieve. You saw the president of Armenia and the head of Azerbaijan both at the White House just a couple of weeks ago. The president, I know, very much enjoyed spending time with them and helping to bring that conflict to an end. He very much enjoyed his time with leaders of Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo in the Oval Office, talking to them about bringing that decades-long war to an end. India and Pakistan. He used trade in a very powerful way as leverage to bring that conflict to an end. So I know he's very proud of all of these achievements, and I know he's very honored to serve as the President of the United States and to restore peace around this world. Go ahead.
So you mentioned Armenia and Azerbaijan. That's a conflict that, I spent time in the Southern Caucasus covering that. And, a conflict of over 30 years, and he resolved it in just a couple of months. Are there other conflicts that the president's working on right now that are off the radar screen that we should be tracking?
In fact, there are many. The State Department is always working around the clock under the leadership of Secretary Rubio and keeping the president apprised of conflicts that are bubbling up all over the world. But of course, as you all know, as we've talked a lot about in this briefing, he's spending a lot of time right now on ending this war in Russia-Ukraine, and of course the conflict in Israel and Gaza, which he wants to see come to a close as well. Sure, go ahead.
So the president says that he's starting a movement to eliminate mail-in voting, but states administer elections, not federal authorities. So can you provide any more details about how the White House plans to eliminate that?
The White House continues to work on this, and when Congress comes back to Washington, I'm sure there will be many discussions with our friends on Capitol Hill and also our friends in state legislatures across the country to ensure that we're protecting the integrity of the vote for the American people. And I think Republicans generally, and the president generally, wants to make it easier for Americans to vote and harder for people to cheat in our elections. And it's quite mind-boggling that the Democrat Party could stand in opposition to common sense. He wants to ensure election integrity. There were great efforts that were made in 2024. I won't get ahead of myself for Hatch Act reasons to get ahead for the next election, but I can assure you this is a priority for the president. Go ahead.
If I could just follow up on your comments about Gaza.
Sure.
There was a ceasefire proposal put forward by both Qatar and Egypt. Hamas accepted it on Monday. Israel has yet to officially weigh in. I'm wondering if the U.S. was at all involved in it, if it's supportive of it, and whether or not the president believes Israel should accept it.
I don't think it's a coincidence that Hamas accepted this proposal after the President of the United States posted a very strong statement about this conflict on Truth Social yesterday. I would refer you back to that statement. As for this proposal that Hamas has now accepted, the United States continues to discuss it, and I'll let the President weigh in on it definitively. You're welcome. Sure.
Caroline, can you describe the president's perspective on taking a stake in Intel in exchange for federal grants? And is this are we expecting to see the White House make similar arrangements with other semiconductor companies and manufacturing companies?
Well, the president, he's been very clear about the need to reshore manufacturing that's critical to our national and economic security. That is especially in regards to chips and semiconductors, which is why the president has initiated the Commerce Department to conduct a study on semiconductors, a Section 232 investigation, so we can ultimately implement tariffs. And it's why our export license requirements remain in place as well. As for this 10% government stake deal, the Department of Commerce continues to work on it. I know Secretary Lutnick is working on it and ironing out the details, but the president wants to put America's needs first, both from a national security and economic perspective. And it's a creative idea that has never been done before to ensure that we're both reshoring these critical supply chains while also gaining something of it for the American taxpayer. You're welcome. Emily.
Thanks, Caroline. I wanted to ask about the 3DS warships that are being sent to Venezuela, and there's 4,000 Marines on board. Are you looking at possibility of boots on the ground there?
What I will say with respect to Venezuela, President Trump has been very clear and consistent. He's prepared to use every element of American power to stop drugs from flooding into our country and to bring those responsible to justice. The Maduro regime is not the legitimate government of Venezuela. It is a narco-terror cartel. In Maduro, it is the view of this administration, is not a legitimate president. He is a fugitive head of this cartel who has been indicted in the United States for trafficking drugs into the country. And with that, I will leave you all, and we will see you later, if not tomorrow. And I look forward to taking more of your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. Thank you.
President Trump yesterday hosting an entourage of European leaders at the White House. with the end game being aimed at ending the Russia-Ukraine war for good. Trump since has touted the meeting, calling it a pathway to peace, and saying he's trying to bring a final close to the deadliest conflict in Europe that's now been going strong for 3.5 years. Those visiting heads of state commending the effort to end the bloodshed.
The fact that you have said, I'm willing to participate in the security guarantees is a big step.
I think in the past 2 weeks, we've probably had more progress in ending this war than we have in the past 3.5 years.
I think it is an important day, a new phase, after 3.5 years that we didn't see any kind of sign from the Russian side that there was a willing for dialogue. So something is changing, something has changed.
Hello, everyone. This is Outnumbered. I'm Emily Compagno, and joining us today, Molly Lyon, Fox News correspondent, Nicole Parker, former FBI special agent, Fox News contributor Lydia Hu, Fox Business correspondent as well, and Lawrence Jones, co-host of Fox and Friends. Now, security guarantees were a major talking point at that key meeting at the White House. European leaders agreed to offer troops to station in Ukraine, which will operate similar to NATO peacekeepers in the event of Russia and Ukraine coming to an agreement. The president says he has not ruled out the idea of putting U.S. troops on the ground in Ukraine.
President Putin agreed that Russia would accept security guarantees for Ukraine, and this is one of the key points that we need to consider.
Your team has talked about security guarantees. Could that involve U.S. troops? Would you rule that out in the future?
We're meeting with 7 great leaders of great countries also, and we'll be talking about that. They'll all be involved. They are first line of defense because they're there. They're Europe, but we're going to help them out also.
So now the president is outlining the next steps toward peace, writing on Truth Social, quote, "I called President Putin and began the arrangements for a meeting at a location to be determined between President Putin and President Zelensky. And after that meeting takes place, we will have a trilat, which would be the 2 presidents plus myself." President Trump says he's optimistic about the trilat meeting, praising his longstanding relationship with President Putin.
I called President Putin yesterday, and I do have a good relationship, but it only matters if we get things done. Otherwise, I don't care about the relationship. I do have a good relationship with him, but I want to get things done. I've solved 7 wars. We ended 7 wars. I thought this would be one of the easier ones, and this has turned out to be the toughest one.
Lawrence Jones, a lot to unpack there on the heels of yesterday, which was a tremendous step toward possibly peace. What is your take?
Well, so often when you hear people talk about Donald Trump, you hear them call him the master negotiator. I think we saw master negotiator turn into master diplomat. And it was for the benefit of the country, obviously, but also the world. I don't think there's been ever a time you've seen a president of the United States have so many world leaders in the Oval Office surrounding the Resolute desk. And I think we've seen the European leaders buy into the philosophy. And Trump won, there was some animosity. At the beginning of his term, you even had some of them talking behind the scenes, going in front of the camera. And they realized that's just not how this president does business. He operates from a place of strength for our country first, but then he wants the killing to stop. So he increased the spending when it came to NATO. That was big, getting it to 5%. But also giving the Ukrainians the weapons and saying, look, I don't want any bloodshed. I don't want to go to war. That is not my objective here. And he did something that I think, I don't know if we could have predicted. So Putin said his red line was the Ukrainians joining NATO. Okay, the president took that. Okay, no, you can't join NATO. But I'm going to give you Article 5 protections. No one has proposed that before. The fact that the president was able to get that done was a big win for the country, also the world. Now we got to flesh out the details.
Right. And Molly, you and I covered this live yesterday together. What a strong, united front presented by so many European countries that was sending a message not only to the Ukrainian people, we are standing by you, but also to Putin that President Trump is not alone in his protection and determination with the Ukrainian people.
Yeah, it was remarkable to watch all of these 7 European leaders come in, being welcomed into the White House and begin this meeting. And we have to realize there was so much for planning before this, getting NATO to put the extra money behind it. So there's actually sort of the meat and potatoes behind the people behind that are sitting at this big table. Giorgia Meloni, the Italian leader, who's trailblazer in her own right, sitting there next to the president, talked about how he'd done something remarkable to bring this dialogue into place. And that nation is one of those that first put forth the idea of the Article 5 protections. So these are people that are coming around. And a lot of phone calls have been made since these leaders left the table. The coalition of the willing, they've been talking, deciding among themselves, among all of these European nations, not just the ones that were at this table, but a much broader group, what exactly those potential protections, those security guarantees that Zelensky wants, what they're going to actually look like.
Lydia, talk to us about the stick that President Trump has in the way of sanctions and tariffs toward Russia, because we know that last night, the night of these peace talks, Russia still lobbed a bunch of missiles in Ukraine's way. So this is still a deadly war despite meeting and negotiations. So what happens next for Russia economically with Trump at the helm?
Yeah, Putin still continues to prove that he is really bloodthirsty in his attempts to in his conquest against Ukraine. But you're right. President Trump has so beautifully wielded his economic agenda that he still has a lot of levers that he can pull in putting Russia in the corner. There's still sanctions that they can employ on the SWIFT system and further excluding Russia from international banking and international transacting, which would make it really difficult for them to continue to do business on the global stage. They can still put pressure on all of their global trading partners, talk about India, talk about China as well. Huge stick there. We can also force our European counterparts, whom we just met with yesterday, to increase their own sanctions. Stop buying even refined oil products that are made from Russian oil. Okay, you're not buying oil products directly from Russia, but don't even buy the refined stuff that India is making from Russian oil. So there's still a lot of levers that President Trump has made, and it's because he got this ball rolling with that beautiful Trump trade and tariff policy.
Yeah. So, Nicole, we heard yesterday that the potential for U.S. troops might be a reality, and that's surprising to a lot of Americans who knew that this president stands for peace and the end to these unending sort of wars. So what is your take on that and how that will play out?
I think that, some of us were surprised to hear that for sure, because, again, President Trump is the one that's going in and trying to end all of these wars. But I think he understands what is necessary in order to bring an end to this. And he's saying, look, U.S., we stand behind you. We support you. I think what's really stunning in all of this is President Trump's ability to strike it while it's hot. And that's a saying that I have always lived by. And he is looking at this moment. I mean, it was completely dead. No talks or discussions for 3.5 years. Millions. It's just so sad, the tragedy, the deaths. And he's saying, you know what, we're going to get in and make a difference. And he's not just talking, he's doing. He had the meeting with Putin on Friday, and then he turns around and has a meeting with all of these powerful individuals from Europe and these leaders. And I think people are waking up to this. And again, he tempers the excitement with saying, look, we're dealing with Putin, okay? We're all very excited and hoping for a peaceful ending here, but let's be realistic. But I think the key also in this is Melania Trump, and I have to give it to her. That letter that she wrote to Putin that we have now found out was about the children. I think that she has such a powerful influence on President Trump and in our ability, and I do think it comes down to human lives. Trump was kind of joking this morning about maybe this will help him get to heaven. You know what? Saving 5,000 to 7,000 lives a week, I think you're pretty secure in making it to heaven, and that is his goal, is to end the deaths.
And that's what it is about for the president, Emily. And he said something in our interview this morning on Fox and Friends. He said there are members of the European Union, members of the heads of state that visited him, that said they were concerned about things going back to the old way once his presidency was over. He goes, I don't want this to just be a 2 to 3 year end to the war. I want long-lasting peace. And I think that's going to be the key with these negotiations as they come.
And certainly if that trilat meeting happens following on the heels of the Zelensky-Putin meeting, I mean, historic does not even begin to cover it. Pursue a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia. It could be his ticket to heaven. Watch.
If I can save 7,000 people a week from being killed, I think that's a pretty... I want to try and get to heaven if possible. I'm hearing I'm not doing well. I hear I'm really at the bottom of the totem pole. But if I can get to heaven, this will be one of the reasons.
But before the president cashes in at the pearly gates, he's got a war to end. President Trump speaking with Vladimir Putin and started laying the groundwork for a historic trilateral meeting between himself, Zelensky, and Russia's leader. And according to a new report, the White House is eyeing the Hungarian capital of Budapest as the potential meeting spot. As for those security guarantees, European leaders agreed to offer troops to station in Ukraine, which will operate similar to NATO peacekeepers in the event of Russia and Ukraine coming to an agreement. But President Trump says there will be no U.S. boots on the ground. Here's 47.
I think really they have respect for our country again. A year ago, they wouldn't have come. I called President Putin yesterday, and I do have a good relationship, but it only matters if we get things done. Otherwise, I don't care about the relationship. I hope President Putin is going to be good, and if he's not, it's going to be a rough situation. And I hope that President Zelensky will do what he has to do. He has to show some flexibility.
European leaders are giving President Trump praise for breaking the logjam with Russia and nudging the war closer to peace. The only ones not cheering? The liberal media, who still want him to flop.
He melted like ice in the Alaska sun as soon as he met with Putin.
It's Trump and Putin versus all of the good guys.
Vladimir Putin is a thug. He's a war criminal. He should not be trusted, and he plays Donald Trump like a fiddle. All four of those things are true.
Greg Gutfeld, so you were just saying, same pattern.
Yeah, nothing new. Budapest. You know what that is? When a monk has fleas. You know you're in a dark place when you're rooting against peace. Because you hate the guy who's brokering. You hate his personality. It's like having a heart surgeon that saves the life of your spouse, but you don't like him because he doesn't recycle. Maybe it's not that important that you don't like him, because if you're rooting against him for doing something good, then it makes you the bad guy. The Never Trumpers could learn something from that heaven quote. He may go to heaven if he saves thousands of lives a day. So Trump haters will seize on the idea that he's always out for himself. He wants to get into heaven, ignoring the fact that Trump's intentions also align with everyone else's. Trump personally wanted Zelensky to dress better. That was his desire, but it helped Zelensky too by dressing up. He's like the dad who wants his son, Timmy, to mow the lawn because he wants a nice lawn, but then Timmy learns the value of hard work and gets some money in his pocket. It's win-win, as my uncle who stutters says. As for the media and these idiots, they don't matter. You don't have to listen to them. This is a post-media world we're living in. After relentlessly pushing Russiagate, Trump has every right to preface every announcement with a middle finger to the mainstream media. Russiagate was designed to destroy him and preserve a Cold War mentality with Russia. That is why they were pushing Ukraine into NATO, which is like pushing Canada into the Warsaw Pact. So it makes you think, what would it have been like without Russiagate? A few million people might be alive that are now dead.
Ugh. Dana, what's the significance of the potential for the trilat or the meeting between Zelensky and Putin?
Well, I think that even though you had the European leaders saying something has changed here and we think it is you. Now, some in the media would say, oh, they only came here knowing they had to flatter Trump. It also happens to be true.
Yes.
And I did find it a little bit interesting. So Susan Rice, who was one of the clips there, she was in the Obama administration when Putin took Crimea. She was part of the Biden administration. She was in the Domestic Policy Council, but basically in witness protection. I don't think she's ever answered a question about how Biden was able to or not unable to do his job in the White House. So it's a level of which I can't totally comprehend when they oversaw 2 incursions from Russia into Ukraine. And now they have the gall to say, oh, he's kissing up to Putin. I can understand that some people would quibble with the way the Alaska summit turned out, right? Maybe you don't need the red carpet, but you got the B-2 bombers flying overhead. Maybe you don't need a big handshake and you don't need to give them a platform, but how else were you going to get them to the table? And now you have a real chance for peace. I think that the progress towards ending the war is something that we haven't seen in several years. And I want to also say something that she's not asking for attention or credit, but I do believe that the First Lady and her conscience and her ability to say, please, husband, I don't know what she calls him, Donald, can you please hand deliver this to Putin? And it was a poignant letter. And I think both of them are very mission focused. Okay, so the mission is help try to end the war. and do what we have to do, and also maybe take a hit because you're giving Putin a platform. But if you don't give Putin the platform, he's not going to come to the table. So now you do have a real possibility for peace. It might not work, but we had no sort of movement like this. President Biden constantly said, as long as it takes. He didn't say whatever it takes. And Trump is not saying that either necessarily, but he is saying, I am going to be the one that gets everybody to the table. And I think that even some in the media are grudgingly having to admit it.
That's the thing, because when so many lives are at stake, Jesse, if there's an even remote chance at peace, isn't that incredible? And shouldn't everyone be on board to applaud any way that we could achieve with peacefulness the resolution of this war?
Well, it's really all about getting into heaven. And I think he's kidding, but he's also partially serious. And that's why we love him, because he has this childlike spirit, this Sunday school of thought that if you just do good things, there's a chance. And it's like the guy likes cheeseburgers and candy and nicknames. And that's kind of why we relate to him, because he's so relatable and revels in these childlike moments. But we can all understand wanting to do good, so we walk into those pearly gates. Now, I think he knows he's been a bad boy. And I think we all know he's been a bad boy. He's not the baddest boy. He's not Diddy, but he's done some things. And he knows the things. And we don't even know all the things he's done, but he knows. And after Butler, he believes he was saved, that God saved his life, and that he is now on a mission from God to put America first and to make peace. And that's great. I don't care what motivates him. I read a little bit about Christianity this afternoon.
God.
Apparently, you actually can't just do good things to get into heaven. There has to be more about faith.
You just learned that today?
Right. Yeah, you can't just do good things and hope it works out. And that's why I'm going in, because I know that Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior, and I'm a really good boy. I'm not nearly as bad as the Donald.
What the hell?
The critics, now they're saying that he shouldn't even meet with him. Nixon went to China and met with Mao. He slaughtered 20 million people. FDR had champagne and caviar and cigars with Stalin. I think another 20 million at that point. Those two guys responsible for more death in the entire world history, maybe Genghis Khan. So there's nothing wrong with meeting with Vladimir Putin. Biden did it. Obama did it.
Biden met with Genghis Khan.
He'll tell you a story about that.
Oh, gosh.
And so they actually got played like a fiddle. Trump's coming in and he's trying to just make peace. And it doesn't matter who the good guys are. When you think about it, Putin thinks he's a good guy. Zelensky thinks he's the good guy. Mm-hmm. We obviously know we have the best guy, and we have the best country, and we have the best intentions. But if the Democrats are going to say the Europeans are the good ones, then how do they square that when the Europeans are saying Trump's amazing and he's bringing more peace at a higher rate than has ever happened before? It's like, what is the Democrat plan? They don't have one to stop the war or win the war. So he's doing all this, and Newsom and Kamala Harris haven't said squat. And if they want to lead this country, they have to say something besides calling Dana a ding-dong.
Shame on him for that happened. Harold, all right, I feel like we sort of were doing half Santa and half heaven. We know getting into heaven is not works related, yes, but let's answer Jesse's question. What is the Democrats' plan? What would be the alternative to this president on his process now?
Well, let me first say, I agree with Jesse. I think that I'm a Christian, and we all try to live our lives and to believe and to have faith to try to get to heaven, and certainly your actions are a big part of that. I heard, but I don't, it's above my pay grade whether the president gets there or not. I hope he gets there. And I do believe if he's able to get an answer here and a solution that is good for Ukraine and good for the Russian people, not Putin, but good for the Russian people, will certainly help him. We should remind ourselves how we got here. Several years ago, when they invaded, the Russians invaded, or Putin invaded Ukraine, many believed that Kyiv would fall in 3 or 4 days, if not a week or so. People doubted the resistance and the resiliency and toughness of the Ukrainian people. It's an amazing thing when you're fierce and pugnacious because you want to dictate your own future and live on your own land, what that may do. We talked about it yesterday, the adaptability of the Ukrainian people to learn how to use the weapons. We have the greatest weapon systems, greatest munitions in the world we develop and produce right here in America. And we've sent them to them for many years. And they have used them against the military that many people believe might be the second strongest military or third strongest military in the world, maybe behind China, if not in front of China, but certainly behind us. And the Ukrainians have basically rebuffed them in so many ways, in the strongest of ways. Now we find ourselves at a time where you have a president who I genuinely believe has a special set of skills, and talents as it relates to trying to bring solutions to challenges. I wish the president hadn't said this morning on the Great Fox and Friends show that he would not send troops. Even if he was not willing to send American troops, I would not have taken that chip off the table. But I understand where he's going. I think part of that might be appealing to some in his base. It's amazing. The great Mario Cuomo once said that you campaign in poetry, but you govern in prose. And sometimes the campaign poetry can clash with or contradict with when you have to govern. Mr. President, you're doing a great job up to this point. Don't hold into account what the Democrats are saying. I will say that Michael Mafal, the former Russian ambassador, U.S. citizen who was a Russian ambassador, praised what the president was able to do with the Europeans there at the White House yesterday. I think the president's entering the toughest part of this, though. He has to decide if sanctions should be restored and if we should continue to give them weapons, including offensive weapons, to go against the Russians. The sad thing is, as much as Putin was good in Alaska, he's still attacking the Ukrainians. So do we try to achieve some sort of ceasefire as they try to create some peace? I'm not going to second guess the president at the moment. I remain optimistic that as I hear him talk and even hear the European leaders talk, Team Europe, I thought the most formidable thing was to see them in the White House yesterday together, speaking as one. If they can continue to do that, I think we can get an end to this thing. And the president may be well on his way to those when he wants to, when the Lord decides it's his time to the pearly gates.
It's pearly gates. All right, guys, up next, Democrats think they can copy MAGA and that voters will suddenly.
President Trump says that he will sort of allow Putin and Zelensky to meet one-on-one together first before, hopefully, he had said earlier today, joining them at a possible future sit-down in hopes of closing a deal in a trilateral discussion. He spoke with Fox and Friends earlier this morning.
So I hope President Putin is going to be good. And if he's not, it's going to be a rough situation. And I hope that President Zelensky will do what he has to do. He has to show some flexibility also.
That pretty much says it all. Let's bring in retired four-star General Jack Keane, Fox News senior strategic analyst, former Army Vice Chief of Staff and chairman of the Institute for the Study of War. General, great to have you with us today. The president, when he says, I hope Putin is going to be good, if not, it is going to be rough. I think that pretty much, that sort of says where we are right now, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Let me just preface my comments by also complimenting what took place yesterday. It was, quite extraordinary. What we really see is the president has established genuine momentum, Martha, and not only the obvious unity that those leaders were displaying, but they're now exhibiting his resolve and his determination and his energy to find peace as soon as possible. That in itself, I've not seen before. And in terms of going forward, the security guarantees are a big deal. And I know for a fact that that is the task that has been given to the Pentagon. And so the chairman of Joint Chiefs is personally involved. The Supreme Allied Commander of Europe, who's a U.S. general, is involved in that process. They are meeting with all the chiefs of defense of the countries that are willing to participate and find out what it is they're willing to put into this. And Zelensky's team, defense team, is also participating. And that would also drive what the United States will contribute based on what others are putting into the security guarantees. And the reason these are so critical, because obviously we have a peace agreement, the security guarantees go in place, and they prevent Putin from attacking. what he has done time and time again in violating ceasefires or violating peace agreements. That has been his method, and we have to take that away from him and provide deterrence. But here's the other thing that's so important, to get all of this done before the next meeting, because if we have real security guarantees that have teeth in them, and Zelensky sees it and accepts the reality of that, oh, we really do have deterrence here. And as a result of that, that gives him plenty of running room to put together some options in terms of a counteroffer that Putin has on the table. You know what his offer is. You've been talking about it. He has to give up the rest of the Donetsk region, even though he doesn't own that territory, and freeze everything else. Well, Zelensky can come up with some other options that may be attractive to Putin and maybe not as detrimental to himself. He's got plenty of options, but with security guarantees, he can move in that direction with more confidence and accept a greater degree of risk. So this is a critical stage we're at here.
Absolutely. I want to squeeze in one quick question from you, if I may, General. Do you think it's a good idea for Putin and Zelensky to meet without anyone else there, just one-on-one? And do you think that will happen? Do you see Putin saying yes to that in Switzerland or in Budapest?
I don't see any problem with it at all, because at some point that has to happen. And if we can get it done now, you know, it'll be a tough meeting. I mean, they're all going to go in there with their very strong positions, obviously, and find out, you know, where the give may be in that process. And I think that's why some others would advocate it would be good if President Trump is in there, because he could kind of, you know, get in the middle of some of that and put some things on the table that maybe both of them could agree to. But at some point, I think it's right to bring President Trump into it. If Putin and Zelensky, both of them want to meet one-on-one, let's get on with it. Because the sooner we start resolving their differences, the better.
And just on the way out here, the NATO military leaders are all meeting in Brussels tomorrow. They'll be discussing the security guarantee package that you have just referred to, General. So we'll continue our coverage and all of our discussions with you. Thank you. It's great to have you with us during these really consequential times. Thank you very much, General.
Yeah, as always, pleasure to be here, Martha.
Thank you, sir.
What kind of outcomes could we be looking at here? For that, we use game theory. You may have heard of it. I love game theory. Whether or not it's Love is Blind on Netflix or it's Golden Balls, a famous game show from the United Kingdom. It's a way of analyzing a situation of conflicting interest in terms of gains and losses. Let's go to the wall to talk about the players and the game and the pieces at play. Of course, in this game, this game of chess on the world stage, the players are Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky. The United States and Europe also involved. But the pieces at play right now in this negotiation are land. Will Russia get control of a contested portion of Donetsk it currently does not control? Security guarantees. Article 5 basically is constituted in a NATO guarantee. Security measures for Ukraine. Will it include the United States? And if neither of these pieces can be moved around, will there be continued attacks? And there were, as recently as last night. So here to help us decode what Vladimir Putin may be thinking is former KGB agent Jack Barsky. Jack, thanks for being with us here today. But just to establish your familiarity with the way things work in Russia, your experience with the KGB, will you quickly share with our audience, you worked as a KGB agent in the United States for years before eventually deciding that you wanted to be on the side of the United States?
Yes, sir. I was an undercover illegal in the United States for 10 years.
All right, and that gave you obviously deep knowledge of not just the way the KGB thinks, but perhaps any KGB agent, including Vladimir Putin. Now you're on the side of the good guys. Now you're on the side of the United States. I'm not going to force you into this analysis through game theory, but I do want to ask you, the game at play seems to me a bit of Sophie's choice or a catch-22. Putin has suggested to Zelensky, give up land, get security guarantees, but you might not retain power in Ukraine. Or Zelensky can choose not to give up the land, continue to prosecute the war, and maybe lose the entirety of Ukraine.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Picture I'm picturing Zelensky and Putin sitting at the same table, staring at each other. They hate each other like two people can hate each other, period. And that hatred is rooted in the history of both nations, started with in the Middle Ages with when the Kiev Rus was formed. And I know enough Ukrainians and Russians to know that this hatred is not going to end. So here's the problem. Assuming that there is a proposal on the table that comes from the United States, based on what you just said, that means both players have to give something up and have to trust that the other side gives something up. It's also, there's a personal aspect involved. Both of these guys are narcissists, political narcissists who are working diligently on their legacy. They can't walk away as losers. So they don't trust each other. And so how can they trust that the other side will give something up too, so they can walk away as not losers, but sort of at least play it that way that, we won something.
You described the historical hatred between these two countries, but you've also brought this down to the personal level, describing them as political narcissists. If you think about this, then, the players, in personal terms, how can you find the compromise that both of these players get a win?
You talk about security guarantees, but again, trust comes into the picture. I think Zelensky will trust the United States and our president, and I believe that Putin has reason to trust Donald Trump, but he doesn't trust the United States and the West. We have been so adamantly anti-Russian in the recent history, based on the Democrat administrations, but also the alt-right. We had a senator of the United States in public call Vladimir Putin a war criminal. Why would I want to trust these people? If they come back to power, whatever they guarantee, I can't trust. So I am sorry, I'm not very, very positive about this here. And I'm generally an optimistic kind of guy. Without optimism, I wouldn't be alive today. So.
Well, I unfortunately as well, you're not alone in your pessimism. If we're looking for optimism, we can find it. It is the fact that we have never been this far downfield. I hope you've been in the United States long enough to appreciate the football analogy. In my analogy, we may not be necessarily close to the end zone, but we've never been further down the field in reaching an agreement to end this war. Jack Barsky, fascinating conversation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Major progress. That is what former U.S. ambassador to Russia under President Obama is saying about the meeting at the White House yesterday with Ukrainian President Zelensky and the European leaders. Watch this.
Whoever had the idea to bring all these European leaders together, in addition to President Zelensky, that was a brilliant, brilliant idea. And having it come so quickly after Alaska was also very important, because now they've changed the talking points here.
Okay, with that, let's bring in Ambassador Monica Crowley. She is currently U.S. Chief of Protocol. We watched her welcoming all of these leaders to the White House. She served as Assistant Secretary in the Treasury in the first Trump administration and a foreign policy assistant to former President Nixon. Monica, great to see you. Welcome, welcome to the program. You have been very, very busy. Here's a photo of you shaking hands with President Putin on the tarmac in Alaska. And then we have you welcoming all of these foreign leaders as they came to the White House the other day. And take a look at the East Room. I just want to move through these images because there were translator booths set up in the East Room. There's a ladder in the back of the room and a bunch of people sitting at microphones to try to translate all of these conversations. So how'd you pull that off, and how much time did you have to make this happen?
Well, it's great to be with you, Martha. Thank you so much. Yeah, we were returning from Alaska, which was a very productive meeting between Presidents Trump and Putin. We were coming back to Washington, D.C., and at about 2 a.m. on Saturday morning, while we were still on the plane, the president was making a series of phone calls around the world, and we heard that President Zelensky was coming to the White House at 1 p.m. on Monday. So we essentially had 36 hours to gather 8 world leaders, including 6 heads of state, gather them at the White House, and make sure every detail was taken care of to ensure the greatest environment, Martha, for the most robust, effective diplomacy. And I think we saw yesterday that only President Trump could convene this kind of gathering of so many world leaders on such short notice in pursuit of peace between Russia and Ukraine. You need a president who's a visionary leader, who is absolutely committed to the peace process, and this president is. I mean, he's already settled about half a dozen other world conflicts around the globe, and this one, as the president has said, has certainly proven to be the most difficult, but he is also incredibly committed to ensuring peace for all of the people in that region.
Yeah, I think everybody would like to see this come to an end. It's hard to imagine why anyone wouldn't want there to be peace in Ukraine after all of the war over the last 3 years. You know, it is stunning, and I bring this image up of President Biden at the G7 summit in Italy when Prime Minister Meloni was sort of guiding him back to the rest of the group, only because you are hearing from people like Mark Penn and Michael McFaul, who worked in Democrat administrations, who are just recognizing the energy of the president, of President Trump, in terms of trying to pull together. And he says himself, you know, who knows if this is going to work, but the effort.
Yes, 100%, Martha. I mean, we all talk about the superhuman strength and superhuman energy of President Trump. He literally works around the clock to make America great again, of course, but he also has these external issues like the war between Russia and Ukraine, which, as he says, would never have started if he had been president. It certainly didn't start in his first term, but he is left with a lot of issues that are very complicated, very dangerous. He's left with all of that to clean up from the Biden years. And so he is absolutely committed to doing it. He really is a man of peace. And of course, President Trump is driven by strategic imperatives for America's national security interests. But he is also really interested in saving lives. And he said it this morning on Fox and Friends. He said, I hope to get to heaven someday. And I hope by saving thousands of lives will help get me there.
He said, I don't know how it's going. I'm not sure if it's going well, but that's what I hope. Monica, we got to go. But was there anything that was like, you know, you're a foreign policy expert, but you're also handling in protocol all of these different, you know, world leaders, and this is how this person likes to do it. Was there anything that was like a, oh my gosh, that's not going to work moment for you?
No, because I think all parties are interested in achieving a peace, and this is what the president has said. So the meetings with President Putin in Alaska, and then, of course, yesterday with President Zelensky and all of the European leaders, there has been a change in the dynamic. Prime Minister Meloni talked about this yesterday with the president. These two sets of meetings have been game changers for the peace process. This peace is not going to happen overnight. You know, we've talked about the peace process in the Middle East. Peace is a process, but only President Trump could have achieved this, bringing both sides and all of these other supporting leaders to the table in record time and getting this process down the path toward peace.
Well, the fact that they all sort of shed, you know, what in other circumstances might have been their preferences for where they want to sit, and this is all only come under this circumstance, I think says quite a bit, actually. And so do we know yet where and when the meeting is going to be with Zelensky and Putin? There were some locations floating around this afternoon, including Budapest.
Yes. Well, I don't want to get in front of the president and any announcements that he may want to make on that. But it was reported this morning that, you know, the president is a man of immediacy and urgency, especially when it comes to saving lives and ending conflicts. So he has indicated that he wants it to happen sooner rather than later. And so that bilateral between Presidents Putin and Zelensky could happen within the next 2 weeks, Martha.
Okay, we'll be watching. Ambassador Crowley, thank you very much. Great.
For more on this, let's bring in Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State and a Fox News contributor. Mr. Secretary, good to have you with us today. So, what do you think would happen if Zelensky and Putin do sit down across the table from each other in a bilat in the next couple of weeks or so?
Well, I think that'd be real progress. Certainly wouldn't happen under President Biden. Look, they'll get a chance to both state their positions. They'll each state maximalist or relatively maximalist positions because they know that there is some tough negotiating that lays ahead. So neither of them is going to walk in with just a a deal that the other one's going to say yes to. So we shouldn't hope for that. But they'll begin to take the measure of where you can actually resolve this. And you start to see it take shape. You heard the European leaders talk about this in the White House yesterday. They began to think about what the security guarantees would look like, what the architecture of that would look like, realistically where the line of contact might resolve, and ultimately how you might deliver a long, just, and lasting peace in Europe in a way that President Biden simply couldn't achieve.
So in terms of the line of contact, we know that Putin floated to President Trump that he would like all of the Donbass region, including the part of Donetsk, Sloviansk, and Kramatorsk, which is under Ukrainian control right now. I mean, can you see Zelensky saying, yes, you can have that in return for security guarantees from European countries and the United States?
John, that seems very unlikely to me. It seems to me the line of contact will almost certainly be wherever the forces are, that is, where the actual line of contact exists when the agreement is reached. I think that's why it's going to require even more U.S. pressure in the days and weeks ahead, because Putin today thinks, look, why do a ceasefire if you're inching along? And it's expensive, lots of manpower, lots of losses, but still firing a couple hundred rockets, drones into Ukraine every night, putting pressure on Zelensky, and then making advances along that line. So I think he's going to chase real estate until the agreement hits, and the United States is going to have to demonstrate that it and its European partners are prepared to impose real cost on Putin before he'll come to say, yep, okay, good enough, and then allow the security architecture to fall into place.
In terms of exacting real costs against Putin, I was speaking with the former Vice President Mike Pence earlier today, who has the position that he believes that President Trump should immediately levy severe sanctions on Russia just to keep Putin focused. And he reminds me of, and I followed him on this trip, we went to Turkey, where he talked with Erdogan about leaving the Kurds alone. And he said the one piece of leverage that he really had to get Erdogan to do what he wanted was a list of sanctions that President Trump was going to slap on Turkey if he didn't play ball. What do you think about that idea?
John, I actually remember that. We ended up sanctioning the Turkish foreign minister, I think their finance minister. Those sanctions stayed in place for less than 48 hours before the Turkish leadership cried uncle. Yeah, I think in the end that's probably right. Remember what Putin will be giving up. By allowing the security architecture, everybody talks about troops on the ground. The most important thing he'll be giving up is that the Ukrainian airspace will be patrolled by the coalition of the willing. No longer missiles and rockets able to be fired into Kyiv and surrounding civilian populaces. So he's going to keep at this on the ground until there is economic pressure. I think the way you just described it, it makes sense. And we shouldn't forget the critical nature of these secondary sanctions, not only against India, our friend, our partner, but against the Chinese, who continue to provide resources to the Russians that are killing Ukrainian kids every night.
One last point I wanted to ask you about, and that's the legacy media's take on everything that's happened since Friday. They were very critical of what happened in Anchorage. And here are some of the headlines from yesterday's meeting. New York Times, Europe's leaders headed off giveaway to Putin. Washington Post, Europeans, Ukraine steer Trump away from Putin's view after summit. Independent UK, Trump broke off his meetings with Europe's leaders to call his friend in the Kremlin. Why? The Guardian, all smoke but no fire as Zelensky emerges unbruised after Trump meet. And Caroline Levitt went off today at the beginning of the briefing about all of the, to quote Spiro Agnew again, nattering nabobs of negativism who've been riding Trump over something that seems to be working.
It's actually worse today than when Agnew made that statement. They were just ignorant then. Now they are downright malicious and anti-Trump, and you can see that. Look, they forgot that President Trump for 4 years didn't give up an inch or allow an inch of Ukraine to be given up. We were very successful at deterring Vladimir Putin. They forget the historical fact that this invasion occurred because for a year Putin built up troops and the United States and Europe did nothing. And so, my advice to the White House and the press team is ignore these folks. It's all just foolishness. Stay on the mission, stay focused, get real objectives, get real outcomes on the ground, and deliver a just and lasting peace for Europe. It's achievable. It's a lot of hard work, but if you pay attention to the New York Times and the Washington Post, you're only going to cause your own cardiologist to have to prescribe more medicine.
Well, there's another famous saying, and that is, you'll never be criticized by someone who's doing more than you. So,
Well said, John. Well said.
We'll see where this goes. Mr. Secretary, good to catch up with you. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I thought I'd do first let them meet. You know, they haven't been exactly best friends. I called President Putin, and we're trying to work out a meeting with President Zelensky. We'll see what happens there. And then if it works out, then I'll go to the trilat and close it up.
So President Trump just moments ago on a potential key meeting in the works. So he's trying to broker a deal between Ukraine and Russia after a war that has dragged on for nearly 3.5 years. And joining us now is Bill Taylor, former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. Before I ask you about what's to come, wanted to get your sense of what happened over the last 24 hours here in Washington, D.C. with all those European leaders here.
I think that we had very good conversation with President Trump.
Very good.
And it really was the best one.
I really want to thank you, President of the United States, dear Donald, for the fact that you, as I said before, broke the deadlock with President Putin by starting that dialogue.
We didn't see any kind of sign from the Russian side that there was a willing for dialogue. So something is changing, something has changed thanks to you.
So far, nobody's been able to bring it to this point, so I thank you for that.
Let me now get your take on those European leaders from yesterday.
As I was saying, that the unity was amazing. It was striking that here they were, called by President Trump, dropping what they were doing, all showing up in support of Ukraine, in support of President Zelensky, because they want President Zelensky, they want Ukraine to stop the Russians in Ukraine. This is about European security. President Macron made this point many times. This is why they are so supportive of Ukraine. That's why they're stepping up. The Europeans are stepping up to provide weapons, finances, and even a coalition of the willing to put troops on the ground in Ukraine.
Let's talk about security guarantees for a second, but first we'll listen to President Trump talking about it from Fox and Friends.
President Putin agreed that Russia would accept security guarantees for Ukraine, and this is one of the key points that we need to consider.
We spoke about very sensitive points. The first one is security guarantees, and we are very happy with President that all the leaders are here, and the security in Ukraine depends on the United States and on you and on those leaders who are with us in our hearts.
He was asked this morning by Lawrence Jones, so what would that look like from the American standpoint? It seems like it's unclear at this point, but overall, these security guarantees are something that Zelensky needs to convince his people to go along with this deal. And I imagine the Europeans are willing to do it because they're worried about their own future security.
Absolutely, Dana. That's exactly what they're worried about. They want Russia to be stopped by the Ukrainians in Ukraine rather than threatening them. So they're willing to put troops on the ground. This is a real security guarantee. There have been commitments before and memos and the Budapest memorandum that tried to give security, didn't. Troops on the ground, a coalition of the willing with actual forces on the ground to be able to backstop, to sit behind the Ukrainians and make it clear that the Russians cannot reinvade. And there's a role for the United States in that. Doesn't have to be boots on the ground, but there's an important role for the United States that President Trump has now acknowledged.
Can I get one quick thought from you about Zelensky and Putin maybe meeting one-on-one?
Your last, so Guy mentioned that Putin is the face of evil in Ukraine. So this, Zelensky will be there with gritted teeth. But in order to end this war, he has to sit down, and he's ready. Zelensky says he's ready to do it.
Yeah. Well, Zelensky might have gritted teeth, but Putin might have fangs out. So that is going to be one to watch. And President Trump said,
"Oh my goodness, I cannot wait for this BS war to stop between Ukraine and Russia." Or some people would say Russia started this whole thing, and some people would say maybe Ukraine sort of instigated this whole thing, but everybody has their own opinion. However, what isn't right is people dying, kids, women, men, mothers, fathers. Look, this whole thing needs to stop. And the only man that I see here trying to stop it is the commander-in-chief, the 45th, now the 47th, Donald J. Trump, the leader of the free world. Most people would say on the left that he's doing the absolute worst. But for the past 4 years now, the only person who has started a dialogue with the president of Russia is President Trump. Biden could have stopped this whole thing by having a conversation with him. All he said was, don't. Don't do what? And then his vice president, Kamala Harris, said, don't. One word. Don't. Man, sit down. Here we are 4 years later. Going on 4 years now. And President Trump started a conversation with Putin, trying to stop this unhinged man. And everybody's complaining about it. Isn't this what we want? The end of this bloodshed? Oh, here we go, Jesse.
70,000 monks just broke their vows of silence to nominate Trump for the Nobel.
Dear Mr. President Trump, we are standing here today with hearts full of appreciation. Today, 70,000 Cambodian Buddhist monks are wholeheartedly supportive of our Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Manet to nominate you for the Nobel Peace Prize. Please accept, Mr. President.
70,000 monks can't be wrong. After Trump brokered a peace deal between Cambodia and Thailand, the monks went ultra MAGA and shaved their heads like Stephen Miller. So 47 thinking about sending them all 70,000 of them Trump 2028 hats, duty and tariff-free. Zelensky and Macron went home yesterday with hats that said 4 more years. Just like when you visit a museum, Trump brought them to the gift shop right before they hit the door. Putin wanted a hat too, but instead Melania gave him a letter that said, stop killing kids. And Trump buzzed them with B-2s.
Alaska was a show of force by President Trump. He invited President Putin to land that the Russians used to own. He displayed a huge amount of military hardware and then did a flyover. It was kind of like inviting your uncontrollable neighbor to your house and showing him your gun case.
Trump's giving everybody options, the easy way or the hard way. This time, Zelensky picked the easy way. He wore a suit, said his thank yous, and brought Trump a big, beautiful gift, a putter from a Ukrainian soldier who lost his legs in a war and then picked up golf. Engraved on the head, let's putt peace together.
Konstantin, first of all, I just watched your swing. I know a lot about golf, and your swing is great. It looks beautiful, and you're going to be a very good golfer very soon. But I also want to thank you for this putter. It's beautiful, and it's made with real love, and it's given to me with real love from you, and I appreciate that. Every time I sink a putt, I'll be thinking about you.
Maybe the president will bring his new putter to Doral, where the PGA just announced Trump's club will host a tour event. The Europeans already calling it Daddy Shack. Yesterday, they were on their best behavior. Trump kept calling France's president by his first name, Emmanuel, and Macron responded with a Mr. President. He was, quote, like a schoolboy speaking to his teacher. That's how President Trump likes his allies to behave. And although the leaders were still meeting as this column went to press, he appears to have whipped them into shape. The Europeans were sitting around the Resolute desk yesterday like they were waiting for class to start. Trump was giving Europe a geography lesson. He even put up the big, beautiful map and sent it home with Zelensky as homework. Now, if Zelensky can read a map like Trump can read a putt, we'll have a deal in no time. The last president to save Europe from Russian aggression was Reagan, and his portrait was staring them down in the Oval. Compare that to Trump's first term, when Europe and Merkel were trying to look down on him and tell him he was wrong. Now Europe realizes he was right about everything, and they're the ones doing the listening. Even Obama's guys are admitting 47's in control.
Whoever had the idea to bring all these European leaders together, in addition to President Zelensky, that was a brilliant, brilliant idea.
Donald Trump didn't make Europe feel too comfortable. When it was time to get down to business and call Putin, he kicked them out of the room.
I didn't do it in front of them. I thought that would be disrespectful to President Putin. I wouldn't do that because they have not had the warmest relations. And actually, President Putin wouldn't talk to the people from Europe. I mean, that was part of the problem.
CNN is now whining that Zelensky had to wait in the hallway.
The fact that he feels he's got to check in with Putin right away still feels like Trump needs Putin's approval in a way that's got to be very disturbing to Zelensky sitting there.
This isn't CNN's first rodeo. They should know the first time Putin and Zelensky talk should be face-to-face, not on speakerphone. And what? Trump's not supposed to call Vlad to set up the next round of talks? Who else is he going to call? Obama talked to Putin. Hillary talked to Putin. Biden even talked to Putin. How are you supposed to end the war if you don't talk to the guy who started it? CNN tried to get the Finns to leak another perfect phone call.
Do you know what Trump, said to Putin on the phone? I mean, what were the specifics that he put out there?
Obviously, in diplomacy, what happens in the Oval Office stays in the Oval Office when the media is not in there. I've been involved in peace mediation before, and I think that President Trump is genuinely trying to bring this war to an end.
Trump says, if you're curious, I'll tell you.
We had a very good call.
So Trump calls the president of Russia, invites him to Alaska. They had a conversation. It's not, finalized, of course. However, that is called diplomacy. Okay, everybody screams, we want a diplomat in the White House. Well, you have a diplomat now, and you don't like it because he's talking to Putin. How did we even get here in the first place? Because Biden did not want to talk to Putin. He said Putin is a killer, is a war criminal. That's why we are here right now. This could have ended 3 years ago. All of those lives probably would not have been lost. But hopefully this man right here on your screen, this man, hopefully God will use him to solve this issue because this is just out of hand.
And I told him that we're going to set up a meeting with President Zelensky, and you and he will meet. And then after that meeting, if everything works out, okay, I'll meet and we'll wrap it up. But it takes in this case two to tango. They have to have somewhat of a relationship. Otherwise, we're just wasting a lot of time. I don't want to be doing that. I just want to end it.
The White House says Putin's agreed to meet Zelensky one-on-one. Could happen within the next few weeks. And they're shopping around for a site. Budapest is now the front runner. But Switzerland making a last-second play, promising not to arrest the Russian leader on war crimes. How diplomatic. But Obama's right-hand woman, Susan Rice, says Trump doesn't understand the art of the deal.
Russia interfered in the 2016 election by disinformation campaigns. And rather than put the sort of pressure on Putin and Russia, he is rolling out the red carpet, doing military flyovers, giving him a ride in the presidential limousine.
Rice thought buzzing Putin with B-2s was an honor. That was a flex. And why not get to know each other in the Beast? 41 flew VAD on Marine One, took him to Kennebunkport to meet with his son. They rode up and down the Maine coast on the family's Fidelity 3. Could you imagine if Trump took Putin to Bedminster and played a round of golf? Picking up the phone isn't even close to that. Rice's commander-in-chief wrote love letters to the Ayatollah. Did that stop the Iranians from nuking up? No. Hillary gave the Russians a reset button. Did that stop the Russians from invading Ukraine? No. The Democrats can sit this one out. Trump's just fixing the left's mess.
From the beginning of this entire process, much of the left-wing media has been actively rooting against the President of the United States in the pursuit of peace. All weekend following those historic U.S.-Russia bilateral talks, we listened to clueless pundits on television trying but failing to claim that the president had failed. The so-called experts in the foreign policy establishment, whose record is nothing but endless wars, trillions of wasted taxpayer dollars, and dead Americans, have the nerve to try and lecture President Trump, who has solved 7 global conflicts in 7 months.
Trump stopping wars that started on Democrats' watch. Even the monks get it. Even Democrats like Stephen A. get it.
It was Biden in office when a full-fledged war against Ukraine took place. It was Russia that invaded Crimea, and that was under the Obama administration. It was Clinton in office when you made a deal that disarmed the Ukraine and therefore weakened them, leaving them dependent on the United States. What I'm saying is promises made are supposed to be promises kept.
What was Joe Biden's plan to win the war in Ukraine?
Oh my God. Oh man. Stephen A. Smith is about to be a Republican, man. Because it's just common sense, y'all. Common sense. Easy. Way too easy. That is a Democrat. Right there giving you the facts. So if you're a liberal, you better listen to your fellow liberal man right there tell you the facts. Don't listen to Republicans, okay? Listen to your fellow Democrat guy right there tell you how many land was taken from former presidents. Russia has been taking lands from Ukraine for a long, long time. Now you have a man who is trying to end it, and y'all going helter-skelter.
He didn't have one. What was Biden's plan to end the war in Ukraine? He didn't have one. If Kamala won, did she have a strategy? Of course not. The Europeans just don't want to be next on Putin's menu. And that makes sense. But now that Trump made Europe foot the bill for the war, they're like, all right, let's call it a day. And after their meeting yesterday, they told Trump at the table, great talk. We'll see you in a month or two.
They said a month or two, you're going to have another 40,000 people dead in a month or two. You have to do it tonight.
The Obama-Biden doctrine of strategic patience, a.k.a. don't change anything, just got doged. Trump doesn't have time for shenanigans. And if you look at the body count, neither does Ukraine. You can see why the president has the wind at his back. Trump's approval rating's been surging. Insider Advantage has him up 8 points since July. But Trump's not making peace for politics or for the Nobel Peace Prize, maybe just a little. He's doing it because he wants to walk through the pearly gates.
I want to try and get to heaven if possible. I'm hearing I'm not doing well. I hear I'm really at the bottom of the totem pole. But if I can get to heaven, this will be one of the reasons.
When Trump got shot in the head in Butler, it changed him. He believes God saved his life to keep him on earth, to put America first and stop the killing. And deep down, Trump knows he's been a little bit of a bad boy.
Oh my God.
Ending the Ukraine war is going to go a long way with the big guy upstairs. Good acts like ending wars don't automatically get you into heaven. As my good friend Harold Ford Jr. says, you also have to love your neighbor as you love yourself and love your Lord with all of your heart.
Facts. Facts, man. Like, I'm just tired of this war for sure. Can we all just live in peace? Like the world, can we all just live in peace? Can we do that? All right, here we go.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio joins us now. All right, Secretary, you were in the room this afternoon with President Trump, Zelensky, all the European leaders. Was there a big moment that happened?
Well, I think the whole thing was a big moment. Unprecedented, really, when you think about all these European leaders came here, 7 that were there, and that included the head of NATO and the head of the EU. And they all said the same thing, which is this, after 3 years of sort of deadlock and no talks and no change in circumstances, this is the first time where there seems to be some movement. Now, look, this is a complicated war. There's no doubt about it. I mean, this has been going on for 3.5 years. A lot of people have died. A lot of territories exchanged back and forth. So it's not an easy thing to unwind. But nothing was happening on this war. Literally, the only option that we were given under the previous administration was continue to fund Ukraine for however much they need, for however long it takes. And now you have people actually talking about pathways towards ending it. Now, it's going to take a little bit more work and a little bit more time, but we are making progress. It's not me saying it. That is virtually every leader there today said that in front of the cameras. And they're saying it for a reason, because it's true and they're witnessing it and they've been a part of it.
So these European nations, and some of these are NATO countries, are they willing to put troops on the ground in Ukraine to cement this peace deal? Would that make Ukraine kind of like a NATO ally?
Well, what's being contemplated, look, any sovereign country in the world has a right to enter into security alliances with other countries. You know, it's not just NATO. We have such alliances with South Korea. We have it with Japan. Other countries have it with each other. And so I think everyone would acknowledge, including, by the way, for the first time, the Russian side, under President Trump's sort of pressure or, a suggestion, is that, in fact, a Ukraine post-conflict has a right to enter into security agreements with other countries. And we will work with our European allies and non-European countries, by the way, to build such a security guarantee. We're working on that right now. We'll continue to work on that. And that'll be something that'll have to be in place after a peace deal, so that Ukraine can feel safe moving forward. And we're coordinating that as we speak. We're involved in the coordination of it. So yeah, there are a number of countries that are willing to step forward and provide Ukraine security guarantees. But as the Ukrainians have said to us, and I think have said publicly, the strongest security guarantee they can come up with their future is to have a strong military moving forward. And that's the other dynamic that's changed. We're no longer giving Ukraine weapons. We're no longer giving Ukraine money. We are now selling them weapons, and European countries are paying for it through NATO. They are using NATO to buy the weapons and transfer them to Ukraine. That's another big change from the way this war was approached just under the Biden administration, for example.
Absolutely. And the minerals deal is also a nice security guarantee.
Correct.
In another way. Were you in the room when the president talked to Vladimir Putin?
I was. And in that conversation, what came from it is that, the president suggested that Zelensky and Putin meet. So we're working on that now to try to set that up for them to meet somewhere, which again would be unprecedented. And then if that goes well, hopefully the next meeting will be a meeting between Presidents Putin, Trump, and Zelensky, where we hope to finalize a deal. We're not there yet, but that's what we're aiming towards. And that's one of the things that was discussed today, is how to get to that point. But just the fact that Putin is saying, sure, I'll meet with Zelensky, that's a big deal. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to leave that room best friends. I'm not saying they're going to leave that room with a peace deal. But I think the fact that people are now talking to each other, this wasn't happening for 3.5 years. This was a stalemated war of death and destruction. And let me tell you something, this president hates war. And he hates it. He thinks it's a waste of money and a waste of lives. And he has made it a priority, President Trump has, to bring about peace. If he sees an opportunity to step in and broker a peace, he wants to do it. He's been successful already 6 times in 6 months in achieving that. And he wants to achieve it with Ukraine and Russia as well.
So the timeline, it looks ideally, is Vladimir Putin meets with Zelensky, and then President Trump and Zelensky and Vladimir Putin meet, the three of them, and hopefully cement some sort of peace deal then. The issue about giving land back seems to be the sticking point. Is that the main sticking point? Is that Russia wants to keep the land that it's taken militarily? And how do you get around that? What's the negotiation over there?
Yeah, I don't think it's helpful to go into all the details of that, obviously, because these negotiations, frankly, work best when they're done privately and in our negotiation setting.
Wait, you don't want to do it on national TV on Jesse Waters' primetime, Secretary? I mean, that's just
no,
crazy.
Oh, we'll be more than... When we have a deal, I'll describe it to you for sure. But okay. But look, that's why you got to give these guys space to work. I mean, they have their own constituencies, okay? They have their own considerations, and you don't want to give away one side's leverage in that regard. But let me just say this about it. I think everyone understands that some of the key elements to bringing this about is Ukraine has to feel safe moving forward. In essence, they have to believe that at the end of this war, they are in a position to never get invaded again. I think what's also true, and I think it's common sense, and I don't know why it's so hard for a lot of people to understand it, is in any negotiation to bring about the end of a war, or any conflict for that matter, it's going to require both sides to receive, but also to give. In essence, one side's not going to get 100% here. Each side is going to have to make some concessions. And obviously land, or where you draw those lines, where the war stops, is going to be part of that conversation. And it's not easy, and maybe it's not even fair, but it's what it takes in order to bring about an end to a war. And that's has been true in every war. The only wars that don't end that way are the ones that have unconditional surrender by one side or the other. And we're not going to see that in this conflict. So obviously the issue of that will be talked about. And the president's been very clear. In the end, what those lines look like are up to Putin and up to Zelensky and up to the Ukrainian side to decide what each one can live with. We are going to be there to facilitate that and make that possible and make sure that both sides are talking. And by the way, President Trump is the only leader in the world, acknowledged by all the Europeans, the only leader in the world that can talk to both of them and bring them both to a meeting is Donald J. Trump, the President of the United States. He's the only one. And the fact that he's willing to do it is something that every American, including Democrats, should be happy that we have a peace president. We should be proud that we have a president that's made peace a priority in his administration.
Absolutely. And I think Zelensky symbolically already making some concessions because he put on kind of a suit. So that is progress.
It looked good, right?
I think it looked great.
Yeah.
We like to see it.
Yeah.
Well, great job and keep up the great work. I know it's tough stuff, but looks like there is a lot of momentum here.
Thank you.
Click here.
Marco Rubio, definitely exceptionally articulate, smart man. All right, here we go. Tulsi Gabbard.
All right, breaking news tonight. The Trump administration continuing to root out the deep state. Earlier today, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard stripped 37 security clearances over a Barack Obama-ordered intelligence report of Russian interference in the 2016 election, which launched Russiagate. She announced the move on X, saying in part that the 37 who had their clearances revoked, quote, abused the public trust by politicizing, manipulating intelligence, leaking classified intelligence without authorization, and or committing intentional, egregious violations of tradecraft standards. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard is here with us with more. This kind of fits in with your original declassification. And that was what you discovered was there was an original senior career intelligence assessment about possible Russian interference in 2016. And they said there was no interference. And correct me if I'm wrong. And then Obama himself reordered another assessment with top intel officials rather than listen to rank and file senior analysts that are career analysts.
So there's a slight difference here in what you're saying, Sean. First of all, thank you for having me on. It's great to see you. The intelligence community assessed in the months leading up to that November 2016 election that, yes, Russia was trying to interfere in our election by sowing discord and chaos, but stating over and over again that Russia did not appear to have any preference for one candidate over the other. They viewed both as equally bad for Russia's interest. The big shift that happened around what is now commonly known as Russiagate was after the election. In early December, President Obama called a meeting of his National Security Council leadership. From that meeting, there was directive that was delivered from President Obama to then Obama's DNI, James Clapper, to then CIA Director John Brennan, to come up with a new intelligence community assessment that contradicted the ones that had been produced previously by the intelligence community. This new one said that Russia, Putin, did try to interfere in the election because he wanted Trump to win. They did this using shoddy intelligence, little pieces of intelligence gathered from places that intelligence professionals refused to reference previously because they knew it was substandard and did not meet the quality and the credibility that is expected of them as intelligence professionals. And they used the Steele dossier, knowing John Brennan knew, James Clapper knew, others within the intelligence community knew that the Steele dossier was a political manufactured document intended to be weaponized against then candidate Donald Trump. Well, Donald Trump won the election. The American people voted for Donald Trump in 2016. So these intelligence leaders, and John Brennan and James Clapper and James Comey, then director of the FBI, then used this Steele dossier as a source for this Obama-directed new intelligence assessment. Again, stating and alleging that Putin, Russia, tried to help Trump win the election. Clearly showing a preference for Donald Trump. Now, if you go to odni.gov, people who say, well, Tulsi, this is just your view or your interpretation, no. It's all in hundreds of pages of documents that I've declassified and released that show point by point exactly what happened through this timeline that showed this very dangerous thing that occurred in the creation of Russiagate, the creation of this manufactured intelligence assessment that essentially had the intent of undermining the voices and votes of the American people who elected Donald Trump. They were not happy with the outcome of that election. And so they created this politicized, weaponized piece of fake intelligence that, as you mentioned, then went on to serve as the foundation for everything that came after, the multiple investigations, the years-long Mueller investigation, 2 congressional impeachments, investigations in the raid at Mar-a-Lago. The list goes on and on. Ultimately, the real crime here was against the American people, because this action singularly undermined the integrity of our democratic republic. What to speak of the fact that some of those folks and those 37 individuals that we revoked, directed the revocation of security clearances from today by under the direction of President Trump, they aided and abetted in this action, this seditious conspiracy that undermined our democracy, undermined our republic, and broke that sacred trust that every one of these professionals is supposed to have from the American people.
Is it fair to say that it's your assessment, and you've had more time to do a deep dive into this than anybody else, that they first wanted to, the intel community, high-ranking members, wanted to influence the outcome of the 2016 election. They knew that the dirty dossier was bought and paid for by Hillary Clinton, and it was from Russia, and it was not true. And then when they were unsuccessful in winning that election, were they then determined to undermine and sabotage the incoming president? Did they also put the cinder blocks on the scale of the 2020 election by pre-bunking a laptop that they authenticated as very real in March of 2020 by pre-bunking it with big tech companies, warning them they may be a victim of disinformation, and then from 2020 to 2024 bloody up Trump? In other words, do we have deep state actors that are trying to influence our presidential elections? Is that what we're concluding here?
Yes, we have people within the intelligence community. Again, when you look at this example of who President Obama charged with this task, John Brennan, James Clapper, James Comey at the highest levels, but also those who worked as careerists within the intelligence community who did not object to their manipulation and manufacturing of intelligence and actually helped them get there. All moving towards their partisan interests, that they were not happy with the outcome of this election, and they were willing to do whatever it took in order to try to undermine President Trump's administration during his first term in office. These are bad actors that have to be rooted out. Our national security depends on it. The ability for the American people's trust to be earned back depends on exposing the bad actors and holding them accountable. And that's what President Trump is determined to do.
Tulsi, thank you. You're doing the country a great service. I hope you...
Tulsi Gabbard, definitely a woman that I would say definitely saved, in my opinion, Pam Bundy. All right. Oh, here we go. We're gonna do this guy right here, Pam Bundy, and then who knows? Here we go.
I sent out 32 letters to mayors around the country, and I believe to 7 governors, telling them you better comply or you're next. We're going to work with our other agencies to cut off their federal funding. We are going to send in law enforcement, just like we did during the LA riots, just like we're doing here in Washington, D.C. And if they're not going to keep their citizens safe, Donald Trump will keep them safe.
That is Attorney General Pam Bondi. She is doubling down on her warning to sanctuary cities and states. They face a deadline of today to reply to her letter, either confirm that they will cooperate with federal immigration enforcement or they must face consequences. And some are still resisting. Boston is one of them. Just today, this morning, the mayor there holding a news conference to say this.
The U.S. Attorney General asked for a response by today. So here it is. Stop attacking our cities to hide your administration's failures. Unlike the Trump administration, Boston follows the law. That has made us the safest major city in the country.
So this comes despite example after example of Boston releasing accused rapists, gang members, drug dealers, and violent assailants, all in defiance of ICE detainers. CB Cotton is here now with more. Hi, CB.
Hi, Aisha. Yeah, today Boston Mayor Michelle Wu doubled down on her claim that Boston's sanctuary policies make the city safer for all Americans. And she accused the Trump administration of using sanctuary cities as a cover-up for what she said was the Trump administration's missteps.
We are picking up the pieces of your failures to deliver on your promises. Under the Trump administration, groceries are less affordable. Housing is harder to build. Cures for cancer are farther away.
Wu's fiery pushback comes after Attorney General Pam Bondi warned Boston and more than 30 other cities, counties, or states cooperate with federal immigration enforcement or risk losing federal money and possibly lawsuits. They had until today to lay out the steps they'd take to, quote, eliminate laws, policies, and practices that impede federal immigration enforcement. While Mayor Wu continues to call Boston the safest major city in America, ICE officers there have repeatedly said sanctuary policies mean no collaboration with local jurisdictions to make arrests, including these ones. Boston ICE agents say they took this illegal migrant from Turkey into custody after he was charged with rape and indecent assault. They also said they arrested this illegal migrant from the Dominican Republic who was charged with assault to rape, assault, and battery with dangerous weapons. And then there's another case when ICE officers in Boston showed Fox the arrest of a Haitian migrant who they said had 17 criminal convictions.
Trump, you feel me? Yo, Biden forever, bro. Thank Obama for everything that he did for me, bro.
Washington State, Colorado, and Rhode Island have already responded to the DOJ's demand. Washington's governor saying he has no intention of changing the state's sanctuary policy, and Colorado's governor flat out rejecting the label of sanctuary state when asked about Bondi's letter by a local station, I should point out. Aisha, back to you.
Okay, CB Cotton live for us. CB, thank you. Let's bring in Gianno Caldwell, Fox News political analyst. Gianno, I'll just have you respond first to Boston's response. It's clear that they are not going to play ball with ICE.
No, they're not. And it's an entire virtual signal. And I got to tell you, I've been of the opinion for many years that sanctuary city policies are racist. Why? Because a person being in this country illegally or committing additional crimes, if they can avoid prosecution or removal based on their race or their national origin, that, in my opinion, is racist. We have a country that has been in shambles in many cities, places like Chicago, places like Los Angeles, New York City over this migrant issue. And I'm glad to see that we have an administration, President Trump and Pam Bondi, who have guts to take on this major issue. The question is, when it comes to the cutting of funding that the DOJ is talking about, are they referring to DOJ grants, which has often been the conversation, or are they talking about overall federal funding? As we know, almost half of U.S. states receive 40% or more of their overall revenue from the federal government. As an example, Illinois received almost $43 billion. So that's an open question I think needs to be answered.
Well, it's always interesting, too, because they're always proven wrong, right? There's always... It's not a problem. It's not a big deal. Nothing to see here. And this is the case that happened in Colorado. We just found out today that there were almost 30 people charged with being leaders of Tren de Aragua, that Venezuelan gang. This is all after Colorado officials were saying nothing to see here. Nothing was going on with these apartment complexes when we had video. We had evidence to prove that there was a problem. I mean, this is no small thing. These charges include firearms trafficking, using guns in drug crimes, illegal possession of firearms. 5 of these defendants also face conspiracy to commit murder for hire. Gianno.
100%. And the problem for many of these particular jurisdictions is they're disenfranchising their very own citizens, the people that are either here, born here, or those who went through the process, waited in line, they paid their money, and they're legal immigrants. Those are real big considerations for folks who came here for the American dream and an opportunity to gain it. They're having to deal with violent criminals that cities are saying, no, you're fine to stay here. That's absolutely wrong. And every American should be applauding the Trump administration on its efforts to change the tide, which has been certainly a deficit for many Americans across the country.
Well, they're going to try to make this a 2026 issue, a 2028 issue, but they're spending a lot of political capital on this. Listen to this. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker could be a 2028 contender for the Democrats. Just signed a law that allows illegal immigrants to receive financial aid. This is what Congresswoman Mary Miller had to say about this. She said, allowing taxpayer-funded financial aid for illegal aliens is a slap in the face to hardworking Illinois families and students. Our state is drowning in debt, yet J.B. Pritzker is determined to drain even more taxpayer dollars to reward illegals. It's absolutely shameful, but this is something that they're going to latch onto all the way to the midterms.
100%. And the Congresswoman is absolutely correct and accurate in her articulation of the facts here. And I got to tell you, Illinois is in a deficit. 2026 is projected to be in a $3.2 billion deficit. By the end of 2025, they would have spent $2.5 million on migrants. So where is the money coming from? In the city of Chicago, they're talking about they need to raise $1 billion to fill the hole. So where does this money come from? And as I mentioned, in 2022, Illinois received billions of dollars, I should say, almost $43 billion from the federal government. So there is a right for the administration to be concerned about these particular policies and Americans across the country, because these are our tax dollars going to fund these things, and it just isn't right.
Yeah, it's interesting to see what will happen, because the administration keeps saying that they will block federal funding, but the courts always get involved and hit back. So we'll be watching what happens next with these sanctuary states and cities. Giano, thanks for joining us. Always good to see you.
Hey, everyone.
One thing I would say for sure is legal migrants do not support illegal immigration. And that's it. Here we go. Scott Bassett.
Perhaps no president since Lincoln has been this focused on finding a real pathway to peace. After the Western world gathered at the White House yesterday to talk Ukraine, President Trump is more insistent than ever that Putin and Zelensky sit down together.
So even these guys, they'll say, okay, let's meet next week. I said, you can't meet next week. Next week, you're going to have 7,000 more dead people. You can't do that. If I can save 7,000 people a week from being killed, I think that's I want to try and get to heaven if possible. I'm hearing I'm not doing well. I hear I'm really at the bottom of the totem pole. But if I can get to heaven, this will be one of the reasons.
Here with me to discuss this, one of the officials, of course, who was there on Monday as this historic gathering unfolded. Joining us in studio, Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Secretary. It's great to see you, as always. All right, tonight, Switzerland, we hear, is offering to give Vladimir Putin immunity from war crimes prosecution if the talks are held there. Given what you saw yesterday, are you hopeful that this meeting will take place, Putin and Zelensky and perhaps President Trump?
Well, Laura, it goes all the way back to Friday in Alaska, because President Trump had a great meeting with President Putin. My take was he had President Putin on his heels for most of the event after the flyover. And then yesterday, a fantastic meeting with Zelensky, then with the Europeans, and then back in the Oval, he had a call with President Putin, and I'm very optimistic they'll be able to have a bilateral meeting.
Were you there when this call with Putin took place?
I was.
Anything you'd like to share with us about the tone, at least the tone of it?
Look, it was very late in Moscow. President Putin was open to meeting with President Zelensky. And as you know, President Trump's very persuasive. They had just met. And as I said, I'm optimistic.
Was Putin up waiting for the call? Did you get the sense?
Well, the president gave him the option. I could call you, send a message, and Putin said, well, I'll be up for 15 more minutes, or you could call tomorrow. And I think Putin wanted the call that night. So that shows he was eager to hear what the president had to say.
The way that the media, who are just never, they're never going to like anything Trump does. I'm just convinced he really could cure cancer, and they would say, why didn't you do it yesterday? So NBC's take on what happened yesterday is that the president was susceptible to total flattery, that the European leaders were there wooing him, that Zelensky put on the suit, and it was, thank you, sir, for all your effort. And that's the only reason President Trump was as magnanimous and as open to security guarantees and so forth. You were there. Tell us what we should understand and take away from what happened.
Well, Laura, again, let's go back to Friday, because the security guarantees go back to Friday, President Trump's meeting with President Putin in Alaska. And President Trump has wanted to end this conflict that never would have started if he had been president. And he convinced President Putin about the security guarantees, that it is what the Europeans call coalition of the willing. The U.S. will not have boots on the ground, may provide some kind of air support, satellite support. And then yesterday, President Trump came in with a plan. He doesn't do these things randomly. And he knew what he had to do with President Zelensky. It was a very good meeting.
That wasn't flattery. The flattery argument on the part of NBC.
Laura, please. It goes back to, again, in Alaska, that President Trump made a mistake inviting President Putin on U.S. soil, or the flattery. It's all the, they're demeaning themselves, because President Trump wants to be a peacemaker. He's done 6 peace deals. He knows how to do this. He went in with a plan. We had a long pregame in the Oval beforehand. He had a strategy the whole time. And I don't think it's flattery. I actually think it's deference, because they understand.
Can you guys just imagine right now that President Joe Biden actually did this stuff right here? Matter of fact, imagine he did half of this right here. Just half. Nobel Peace Prize, baby.
President Trump is the only person in the world who can stop this conflict.
When we talk about security guarantees, obviously, other than the land swap and what slice of land we're talking about here, that's a big issue. The other big issue is security. What does it look like? We understand no boots on the ground. But a U.S. air cover costs a lot of money. And the obvious question on the part of many, after 70 years of NATO and America carrying the burden for NATO's defense, is that this is going to fall once again on the shoulders of the American taxpayers, that we are going to pay the lion's share of this burden. Is that a legitimate concern?
Well, I'm not concerned, Laura, because from the beginning, since he got into the Oval on January 20th, President Trump has been talking about not sending any more money to Ukraine. We did this economic partnership, which, once this conflict stops, could pay off big for the American taxpayer. We can recoup our investment. If Ukraine does well, we do well. If the conflict stops, and the conflict's got to stop for the economic partnership to really kick in, we're going to start with some investments now. So I think President Trump is very vigilant. Right now, we are selling arms to the Europeans, who are then selling them on to the Ukrainians, and President Trump's taking a 10% markup on the arms. So maybe that 10% will cover the cost of the air cover.
Now, you know better than anyone that the Russian economy really isn't strong enough or big enough to carry on a sustained war. I mean, certainly not indefinitely. Couldn't do it without the help of India, buying mostly oil. Could not do it without the help of China, which is providing the bulk of the support to Russia. Now, India has gotten hit with secondary tariffs, which I think is very positive, put them back on their heels a bit. But China really is the big contributor to Russia's current economic stability. Given that, why haven't we put significant secondary tariffs on China? for what they're doing to help Russia?
Well, a couple of things there, Laura. One, China had always been buying Russian oil. So in 2022, 13% of their oil came from China, and now it's 16%, and they want a diversified oil supply. India, on the other hand, got about 1% of their oil from China in 22. Now it's up to 37%. So they're doing what I call the Indian arbitrage. They're buying cheap Russian oil, selling petrochemicals back out. Much of that is going to the richest families in India. We already have very high tariffs on China, and now India is going to see what it feels like.
But China buys an enormous amount of ag from Russia as well, and they are the biggest supporter of Russia. Without China, Russia couldn't be in this war. Do you not agree?
I agree. They've $15 billion minimum in dual-use technologies and other support that I'm sure we don't know about.
What can you tell us about the current state of the issue of TikTok? Because the president and the White House, I mean, the president enjoys TikTok. Obviously, there's a lot of support on TikTok during the campaign. That's been a question for our relationship with China. You're going to be in these negotiations with China. But we've been told for years, including by President Trump, that this is a security issue for America and Americans. Our data, the power of China's propaganda, yet, a lot of people on TikTok. I'm not on TikTok, but a lot of people are, including the White House. What can you tell us?
Laura, I wear a lot of hats in the administration. I am not part of the TikTok negotiations. I do lead the China negotiations, and in Stockholm, TikTok was not part of that.
When do you expect that we will see movement on the China talks? And do we need a trade agreement with China, given how well the tariffs are working out?
We're very happy. We had 20%, about 25% tariffs from President Trump's first term. We've added 20% fentanyl tariffs, 10% baseline tariffs. So we're at 50 or 55%. China is right now the biggest revenue line in the tariff income. So, if it's not broke, don't fix it. We have had very good talks with China. I imagine we'll be seeing them again before November. They have a 10% tariff on us. They have started shipping the rare earth magnets, which we agreed to. We had put some countermeasures on them that we've taken off. So I think right now the status quo is working pretty well.
The rare earths and the magnets, obviously those are the critical things we need from China. How difficult a situation are we in without an industrial policy that it almost makes it an emergency for us to be independent of our strongest adversary when it comes to those critical things, rare earths and magnets?
Or it's rare earths magnets, but it's so many other things. It's the single biggest point of failure for the U.S. economy and for the Western economies. 99% of high-value chips are made on the island of Taiwan. So we're trying to bring semiconductor manufacturing back to the U.S. We're trying to bring steel production back to the U.S. We're bringing pharma back to the U.S. under President Trump's leadership. There's a group of us in the cabinet, in the White House, who believe if we have not de-risked the U.S. economy and brought these industries back on shore when we walk out the door in January 2029, we will have failed, and we are not going to fail.
And your message to Congress tonight, because without Congress really taking action and spending real money for our own industrial policy, this is going to be more difficult.
We've got to do this. The only good thing about COVID was it was a beta test. We could see there were plenty of unreliable suppliers. I mean, think about this. 90% of the precursor pharma products that we get for very basic medicines, the antibiotics for children come from China or India. So we have to bring a big amount of that home.
State of the economy right now. Little tech challenges in the recent days, look at the market every day, but some sense that the economy might slow in this next, couple quarters and come back gangbusters next year, given all the build out and the effect of the tax cuts. What do you say?
I think we're going to really pick up in the fourth quarter. There can be a pause here. I always said we were going to have a detox as we cut back on the Biden spending. Second quarter of this year, the government's contribution was down. So we will have a little pause here. And the one big beautiful bill will start kicking in, I predict, in the fourth quarter. And I think 2026 could be gangbusters. But Laura, Problem right now is we have some distributional problems in the economy. CapEx is doing well thanks to the One Big Beautiful Bill. AI is doing well. Housing and
interest rates. I mean, they still got Powell with the interest rates.
Well,
I mean, I think you can fire Powell. Personally, everyone's worried about the market collapsing. I think it's a 2-day story. Honestly, I think it's a 2-day story. He's really, really hurting the economy. I don't have to tell you that.
Certain segments of the economy, including the bottom 50% of wage earners in America who don't have assets. If you don't have assets, you're not doing well. But by bringing the manufacturing back home, not only do we have more economic security, workers are going to have higher pay. Manufacturing jobs, I don't have to tell you, are the best way to real income gains. So
we're hearing, by the way, just that the Trilat meeting may be in Budapest. Can you confirm that?
The Trilat or the Bilat?
The Trilat. That's what we're hearing.
Oh. Could be. We got to get through the bilat first.
Yeah, that's what I say.
Yeah.
Secretary Bessent, thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing how all this.
Everybody working with the Commander-in-Chief, the leader of the free world, Donald J. Trump, the 45th, now the 47th. Every single one of these men and women are absolutely smart. This guy right here, his brain is on fire. And most people don't know he is actually gay. Okay? Trump's in like LGBTQ community. He's gay. Scott Bessent is actually gay. And he's working with the Commander-in-Chief. So, ladies and gentlemen, the only thing we ask is no boys and girls sport. Okay? I'll leave the girls in the girls' bathroom. Okay. Can we do that? I know, all this sex change surgery and this BS y'all be talking about. All right, here we go. For kids.
So the White House is telling you just to go take a hike.
I try to hike every day because it improves my focus, my clarity, my creativity.
Lots of other benefits, cardiovascular benefits because you're getting your heart going and it gets your blood sugar where it needs to be.
If you want to have good health, if you want to have good connections to your community, to your environment, get out and do at least 15 minutes of walking a day.
Oh, good dear.
Kennedy's on a cross-country tour. He went hiking in Colorado and farming in Idaho.
I'm here with Steve Jarvis, who's a fifth-generation regenerative farmer. When he grew up, it wasn't called regenerative farming, it was called farming. He's growing without the use of pesticides or fertilizers, very, very little fertilizer, and without any kind of chemical intervention. We're losing the health of our kids. We need to start giving them healthy food that is locally grown, and we need to start
You guys, this man is 71 years old.
transitioning away from destructive agriculture that's destroying the soil.
Being healthy is actually pretty simple. Eat clean, move your body, go outside, make love. You don't have to make love outside, just do both. Not necessarily at the same time.
Make love, babe.
It's the government, big food and big pharma that make everything so poisonous.
The dietary guidelines that we inherited from the Biden administration were 453 pages long. They were driven by the same commercial impulses that put Fruit Loops at the top of the food pyramid. We are going to release dietary guidelines that are 4, 5, or 6 pages.
And here's another thing right here. Somebody just said in the comment section, it will take 10 years to bring back manufacturing to the United States. So if it's going to truly take 10 years to bring back manufacturing to the great old USA, so wouldn't it be logical and sensible to start right now? If you're saying it's going to take 10 years, so you don't think we should start like last week or last year or 2 years ago? You would prefer we start when? When do you want us to start? If it's going to take 10 years, when do you actually want us to start? You start right now. So because it's going to take 10 years, we should never do it. Don't bring back manufacturing. It's going to take 10 years.
Long that are understandable, and they will begin to change America almost immediately.
RFK is putting his money where his mouth is. He teamed up with Secretary Hegseth to start the Pete and Bobby Challenge.
Here we are in the bowels of the Pentagon for the Pete and Bobby Challenge.
And the challenge is to do 100 push-ups and 50 pull-ups in any order you want in under 10 minutes.
Whoa.
The Secretary of Defense
This is what I
shark
voted
attack.
for.
You can do better, Ranger Tom! Let's go! Make your country proud!
We want to send out a challenge to Sean
Make your country
Let's
proud.
challenge the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Raising Cane, and then my friend on TV, Will Kane. We hope Americans will take this challenge and you'll pass it along.
Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is here. Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for joining us. Before we get started, I have to ask you a question that everybody's wondering about. Why do you wear jeans when you work out?
Well, I just started doing that a long time ago because I would go hiking in the morning and then I'd go straight to the gym. And I found it was convenient, and now I'm used to it, so I just do it.
Okay. There were a lot of theories, but that makes perfect sense. So I misread
good
the
genes,
challenge.
baby.
I got up in the morning and
He has good genes. Okay? Like C. Shelley. Good genes, baby. Shout out to Dr. Luke. He says, Genesis, we should have started 10 years ago, but now it's the second best time. Absolutely. Shout out to Dr. Luke the GOAT. God bless you for the super chat. Thank you.
I thought you'd do 100 push-ups and 50 pull-ups in 5 minutes. So I tried it in 5 minutes and I failed. And then I came into the office and I heard I had an extra 5 minutes. So I know I can do it. I just needed a little bit more time. How long did it take you?
I got 5 minutes and 48 seconds.
Oh, my God.
And Pete got 5 minutes and 25 seconds. But that Marine that Marine woman that you filmed, she got 3 minutes and 46 seconds.
Get out of here.
And one of the Marines got 2 minutes and 40 seconds. So, but I really wanted to see what you do, and I think, Jesse, if you could put it,
Whoa, look at
post
her.
it on.
Look at that lady. C. Shelley, get in here. C. Shelley, get in here. C, you need to get in here now. There ain't no way you're going to let that lady be doing push-ups like that and pull-ups. Come on, C.
Do and I think,
Come on,
Jesse,
C.
if you could put it, post it
Get in
on
here.
TikTok or X, the actual
Sandra,
film
where
of you
you
doing it, and then it will make it easier for us all to check your style.
To believe me is what you're saying. Okay. I'll see what I can do and we'll put it up on the show. And now that I know that I have 10, I'm going to pace myself. Is this like the ice bucket challenge where people were naming somebody and it's just a kind of a good thing to get momentum with? Why is this so important?
I mean, we're trying to get our kids now are spending 7 hours a day on average in front of their screens. And we got to get them out. My uncle in 1960, a month before he took the oath of office, he wrote an article for Sports Illustrated called The Soft American, and it was about how worried he was that we were falling behind Europe and other nations, and that America had been created by this beef jerky toughness. We were the toughest people in the world. We tamed the wilderness. We built this extraordinary economy, and now we were losing that. And today it is so much worse. 8 out of 10 of our kids cannot qualify for military service. And the obesity rates are over 50%. The diabetes rates now, 38% of our teens are pre-diabetic or diabetic. And, you can, 77% of type 2 diabetes cases can lose their diagnosis or arrest the disease just by changing their diet. So we need to start thinking about getting Americans in shape again. And we made this challenge, particularly for young people. We'd love you to post your time, your challenge on Instagram or Truth Social or X or TikTok or Facebook. And we're just challenging people to get up and get moving.
All right. Well, challenge accepted. And first, I'm going to take a hike. Not in jeans, but maybe shorts. Secretary Kennedy, thank you so much for joining Primetime, and keep.
All right, there's no way we're going to let this 71 years old man, RFK Jr., come up here thinking he can beat we the young bloods to this type of stuff. Come on, man. Jet, give me 20 right there real fast. Jet, there's no way you're going to let this 71 years old man beat us. No, man. See, get in here. Dr. Luke. Dr. Luke now. There's no way you're going to let this man do this. Heck no. There's just no way, Dr. Luke. We got to step up. We got to step it up.
And welcome to Hannity. And tonight, huge breaking news. The Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, will join us after stripping 37 security clearances from anti-Trump operatives who are weaponizing the intel community. Our indictments possibly far behind. Also later tonight, Stephen Miller. He will try and analyze the Democratic Party's descent into utter...
Sandra, yes. That's it. That's the spirit right there. You could do 4. You know, when you keep working on it, before you know it, you start doing 6, 8, 10. And that's how it goes. See, Shelly's probably right there with a smoothie right now saying, y'all get on it.
Lawlessness and theatrics. Take a look.
What?
All right, a mariachi band at a press conference to protest deportations. Only the party that puts the so-called rights of illegal immigrants over your safety and your family's safety and security can come up with that one. Also, a serious question. Can the Democratic Party get any worse? Our good friend Stephen A. Smith calling out his own party. I think he's finally getting Hannitized for their horrific record. Take a look.
It was Biden in office when a full-fledged war against Ukraine took place, courtesy of Russia's instigation, no matter what they try to say to Trump. It was Russia that invaded Crimea, and that was under the Obama administration. It was Clinton in office when you made a deal that disarmed the Ukraine and therefore weakened them, leaving them dependent on the United States.
He's riled up. Our buddy Stephen A. Smith will join us in just a moment. But our first guest is someone who, frankly, does not get enough credit from America's so-called journalists, the state-run legacy media mob. He's been flying all around the world, trying to bring peace to the Middle East and to Europe. When it comes to tough negotiations around the world, there's perhaps no one better at this than Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff. Now, prior to the Alaska summit, Witkoff was diligently negotiating in Russia with Putin behind the scenes personally to try and carve out common ground prior to Alaska, while also personally delivering President Trump's message to Russia. Witkoff is getting results. The Alaska summit, in spite of what the media mob would tell you, it was a huge success. If it wasn't, then why would Zelensky, NATO leaders, European leaders, why would they fly all the way across the pond on a day's notice and meet with President Trump at the White House? No other world leader is capable of pulling any of this off but Donald Trump. And it perfectly embodied the president's core strategy of peace through strength. In the end, it will be the two sides in this conflict. It's going to be Putin, it's going to be Zelensky, it's going to be Russia, it's going to be Ukraine, and it will be Europe that determine the final outcome. But for the first time in 3 years, there is hope that the death, the dying, the destruction may stop. If not, President Trump said there will be severe consequences for Vladimir Putin and Russia, and depending on how long it continues, Ukraine, it may no longer exist. Not good for anybody. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said it this way. Take a look.
I want to set the record straight on what went on in Alaska. Alaska was a show of force by President Trump. He invited President Putin to land that the Russians used to own. He displayed a huge amount of military hardware and then did a flyover. It was kind of like inviting your uncontrollable neighbor to your house and showing him your gun case.
All right, so thanks to the president's leadership, the world finally has a chance at peace. I thought liberals, all we're saying is give peace a chance. You would think they'd be happy with Donald Trump tonight, but they're not. And the next steps are coming into focus. A bilateral meeting between Zelensky and Putin is now under consideration. Another option, a trilateral meeting between the pair and President Trump. That is also a possibility. In my strong but humble opinion, that would be the best option for peace. I think we probably need someone to be a referee in that room, or Putin and Zelensky may kill each other. Now, the rest of Europe, they shouldn't get a seat at the table. As per usual, the EU has grossly mismanaged this regional crisis well before a single shot was ever fired. In fact, they have been funding Putin's war machine for decades. Take a look at your screen. Now, prior to Putin's invasion of Ukraine, several European countries were buying 100% of their energy, the lifeblood of every country's economy, from Russia. Even major European powers like Germany were sending tens of billions of dollars to Vladimir Putin. He's supposed to be their, quote, enemy. He's the one they're afraid of. In Trump's first term, Europe defied his warnings. They doubled down on stupid, building more pipelines and more pipelines into Russia while shuttering their own energy facilities. And according to reports, even several years into the war, Europe was still sending Putin around $22 billion for Russian energy. In other words, they were funding Putin's war on their own continent while begging the U.S. to send more cash, more weapons to Ukraine. Thankfully, President Trump is putting an end to all this madness, hopefully an end to the killing. And of course, we still do not know when or even a peace agreement can be reached here. Putin is not someone you can trust, but with possible land swaps, European security guarantees for Ukraine, we have never been closer to a resolution. We've got a shot here. And it's all possible because of President Trump. He made peace a priority. Look at all the countries he has played a role in bringing peace to around the globe. Time and time again, he is sending the right people to negotiate. He squeezed Putin with a massive EU-U.S. energy trade deal, nearly $1 trillion, and harsh new tariffs against purchasers of Russian oil like India, along with a new weapons deal for Ukraine. Okay, Vladimir, we'll let them buy the weapons if this is what you want. And it was President Trump that rallied NATO states in Europe to more than double their defense spending for NATO. That is how Donald Trump got Vladimir Putin's attention. And despite all of this, the media mob and the Democratic Party, they have been openly rooting for failure, even mocking President Trump for trying to restore peace. And today, the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, issued this very forceful response. Take a look.
From the beginning of this entire process, much of the left-wing media has been actively rooting against the President of the United States in the pursuit of peace. Diplomacy is a delicate process, and instead of reporting the facts about what is happening here at this White House and what is happening between this president and other leaders around the world, many outlets in this room continue to try to actively undermine the president and sabotage the efforts towards peace.
Well said. In reality, most of the so-called journalists and the media mob, they're totally clueless. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe.
Oh, my goodness. That was a great laugh. Oh, man. All right, we're going to run this real fast. Wait, before we do that, I think we might want to do Stephen. Oh, no. Let's do the 5 right here. All right, what's for breakfast?
Pursue a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia. It could be his ticket to heaven. Watch.
If I can save 7,000 people a week from being killed, I think that's a pretty. I want to try and get to heaven if possible. I'm hearing I'm not doing well. I hear I'm really at the bottom of the totem pole. But if I can get to heaven, this will be one of the reasons.
But before the president cashes in at the pearly gates, he's got a war to end. President Trump speaking with Vladimir Putin and started laying the groundwork for a historic trilateral meeting between himself, Zelensky, and Russia's leader. And according to a new report, the White House is eyeing the Hungarian capital of Budapest as the potential meeting spot. As for those security guarantees, European leaders agreed to offer troops to station in Ukraine, which will operate similar to NATO peacekeepers in the event of Russia and Ukraine coming to an agreement. But President Trump says there will be no U.S. boots on the ground. Here's 47.
I think really they have respect for our country again. A year ago, they wouldn't have come. I called President Putin yesterday, and I do have a good relationship, but it only matters if we get things done. Otherwise, I don't care about the relationship. I hope President Putin is going to be good, and if he's not, it's going to be a rough situation. And I hope that President Zelensky will do what he has to do. He has to show some flexibility.
European leaders are giving President Trump praise for breaking the logjam with Russia and nudging the war closer to peace. The only ones not cheering? The liberal media, who still want him to flop.
He melted like ice in the Alaska sun as soon as he met with Putin.
It's Trump and Putin versus all the good guys.
Vladimir Putin is a thug. He's a war criminal. He should not be trusted, and he plays Donald Trump like a fiddle. All four of those things are true.
Greg Gutfeld, so you were just saying, same pattern.
Yeah, nothing new. Budapest. You know what that is? When a monk has fleas. You know you're in a dark place when you're rooting against peace. Because you hate the guy who's brokering. You hate his personality. It's like having a heart surgeon that saves the life of your spouse, but you don't like him because he doesn't recycle. Maybe it's not that important that you don't like him, because if you're rooting against him for doing something good, then it makes you the bad guy. The Never Trumpers could learn something from that heaven quote. He may go to heaven if he saves thousands of lives a day. So Trump haters will seize on the idea that he's always out for himself. He wants to get into heaven, ignoring the fact that Trump's intentions also align with everyone else's. Trump personally wanted Zelensky to dress better. That was his desire, but it helped Zelensky too by dressing up. He's like the dad who wants his son, Timmy, to mow the lawn because he wants a nice lawn, but then Timmy learns the value of hard work and gets some money in his pocket. It's win-win, as my uncle who stutters says. As for the media and these idiots, they don't matter. You don't have to listen to them. This is a post-media world we're living in. After relentlessly pushing Russiagate, Trump has every right to preface every announcement with a middle finger to the mainstream media. Russiagate was designed to destroy him and preserve a Cold War mentality with Russia. That is why they were pushing Ukraine into NATO, which is like Russia pushing Canada into the Warsaw Pact. So it makes you think, what would it have been like without Russiagate? A few million people might be alive that are now dead.
Ugh. Dana, what's the significance of the potential for the trilat or the meeting between Zelensky and Putin?
Well, I think that even though you had the European leaders saying something has changed here and we think it is you. Now, some in the media would say, oh, they only came here knowing they had to flatter Trump. It also happens to be true.
Yes.
And I did find it a little bit interesting. So Susan Rice, who was one of the clips there, she was in the Obama administration when Putin took Crimea. She was part of the Biden administration. She was in the Domestic Policy Council, but basically in witness protection. I don't think she's ever answered a question about how Biden was able to, or not unable to, do his job in the White House. So it's a level of which I can't totally comprehend when they oversaw 2 incursions from Russia into Ukraine, and now they have the gall to say, oh, he's kissing up to Putin. I can understand that some people would quibble with the way the Alaska summit turned out, right? Maybe you don't need the red carpet, but you got the B-2 bombers flying overhead. Maybe you don't need a big handshake and you don't need to give them a platform, but how else were you going to get them to the table? And now you have a real chance for peace. I think that the progress towards ending the war is something that we haven't seen in several years. And I want to also say something that she's not asking for attention or credit, but I do believe that the First Lady and her conscience and her ability to say, please, husband, I don't know what she calls him, Donald, can you please hand deliver this to Putin? And it was a poignant letter. And I think both of them are very mission focused. Okay, so the mission is help try to end the war. and do what we have to do, and also maybe take a hit because you're giving Putin a platform. But if you don't give Putin the platform, he's not going to come to the table. So now you do have a real possibility for peace. It might not work, but we had no sort of movement like this. President Biden constantly said, as long as it takes. He didn't say whatever it takes. And Trump is not saying that either necessarily, but he is saying, I am going to be the one that gets everybody to the table. And I think that even some in the media are grudgingly having to admit it.
That's the thing, because when so many lives are at stake, Jesse, if there's an even remote chance at peace, isn't that incredible? And shouldn't everyone be on board to applaud any way that we could achieve with peacefulness the resolution of this war?
Well, it's really all about getting into heaven. And I think he's kidding, but he's also partially serious. And that's why we love him, because he has this childlike spirit, this Sunday school of thought that if you just do good things, there's a chance. And it's like the guy likes cheeseburgers and candy and nicknames. And that's kind of why we relate to him, because he's so relatable and revels in these childlike moments. But we can all understand wanting to do good, so we walk into those pearly gates. Now, I think he knows he's been a bad boy. And I think we all know he's been a bad boy. He's not the baddest boy. He's not Diddy. But he's done some things. And he knows the things. And we don't even know all the things he's done. But he knows. And after Butler, he believes he was saved. That God saved his life. And that he is now on a mission from God to put America first and to make peace. And that's great. I don't care what motivates him. I read a little bit about Christianity this afternoon. God. Apparently, you actually can't just do good things to get into heaven. There has to be more about faith.
You just learned that today?
Right. You can't just do good things and hope it works out. And that's why I'm going in, because I know that Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior, and I'm a really good boy. I'm not nearly as bad as the Donald. What the hell? The critics, now they're saying that he shouldn't even meet with him. Nixon went to China and met with Mao. He slaughtered 20 million people. FDR had champagne and caviar and cigars with Stalin. I think another 20 million at that point. Those two guys responsible for more death in the entire world history, maybe Genghis Khan. So there's nothing wrong with meeting with Vladimir Putin. Biden did it. Obama did it.
Biden met with Genghis Khan.
He'll tell you a story about that. Oh, and so they actually got played like a fiddle. Trump's coming in and he's trying to just make peace. And it doesn't matter who the good guys are. When you think about it, Putin thinks he's a good guy. Zelensky thinks he's the good guy. Mm-hmm. We obviously know we have the best guy, and we have the best country, and we have the best intentions. But if the Democrats are going to say the Europeans are the good ones, then how do they square that when the Europeans are saying Trump's amazing and he's bringing more peace at a higher rate than has ever happened before? It's like, what is the Democrat plan? They don't have one to stop the war or win the war. So he's doing all this, and Newsom and Kamala Harris haven't said squat. And if they want to lead this country, they have to say something besides calling Dana a ding-dong.
Shame on him for that happened. Harold, all right, I feel like we sort of were doing half Santa and half heaven. We know getting into heaven is not works related, yes, but let's answer Jesse's question. What is the Democrats' plan? What would be the alternative to this president on his process now?
Well, let me first say, I agree with Jesse. I think that I'm a Christian, and we all try to live our lives and to believe and to have faith to try to get to heaven, and certainly your actions are a big part of that. I heard, but I don't, it's above my pay grade whether the president gets there or not. I hope he gets there. And I do believe if he's able to get an answer here and a solution that is good for Ukraine and good for the Russian people, not Putin, but good for the Russian people, will certainly help him. We should remind ourselves how we got here. Several years ago, when they invaded, the Russians invaded, or Putin invaded Ukraine, many believed that Kyiv would fall in 3 or 4 days, if not a week or so. People doubted the resistance and the resiliency and toughness of the Ukrainian people. It's an amazing thing when you're fierce and pugnacious because you want to dictate your own future and live on your own land, what that may do. We talked about it yesterday, the adaptability of the Ukrainian people to learn how to use the weapons. We have the greatest weapon systems, greatest munitions in the world we develop and produce right here in America. And we've sent them to them for many years. And they have used them against the military that many people believe might be the second strongest military or third strongest military in the world, maybe behind China, if not in front of China, but certainly behind us. And the Ukrainians have basically rebuffed them, and so
we got to take that back so that everybody knows where we stand in this food chain. Okay.
We develop and produce right here in America, and we've sent them to them for many years, and they have used them against the military that many people believe might be the second strongest military or third strongest military in the world, maybe behind China, if not in front of China, but certainly behind us. And the Ukrainians have basically rebuffed them in so many ways, in the strongest of ways. Now we find ourselves at a time where you have a president who I genuinely believe has a special set of skills, has a special set of skills and talents as it relates to trying to bring.
He says he has a special type of skills. Has any of you seen the movie Taken? That was the same line Liam Neeson said in that particular scene. I have a special type of skills.
In the strongest of ways. Now we find ourselves at a time where you have a president who I genuinely believe has a special set of skills, has a special set of skills and talents as it relates to trying to bring solutions to challenges. I wish the president hadn't said this morning on the Great Fox and Friends show that he would not send troops. Even if he was not willing to send American troops, I would not have taken that chip off the table. But I understand where he's going. I think part of that might be appealing to some in his base. It's amazing. The great Mario Cuomo once said that you campaign in poetry, but you govern in prose. And sometimes the campaign poetry can clash with or contradict with when you have to govern. Mr. President, you're doing a great job up to this point. Don't hold into account what the Democrats are saying. I will say that Michael Mafal, the former Russian ambassador, U.S. citizen who was a Russian ambassador, praised what the president was able to do with the Europeans there at the White House yesterday. I think the president's entering the toughest part of this, though. He has to decide if sanctions should be restored and if we should continue to give them weapons, including offensive weapons, to go against the Russians. The sad thing is, as much as Putin was good in Alaska, he's still attacking the Ukrainians. So do we try to achieve some sort of ceasefire as they try to create some peace? I'm not going to second guess the president at the moment. I remain optimistic that as I hear him talk and even hear the European leaders talk, Team Europe, I thought the most formidable thing was to see them in the White House yesterday together, speaking as one. If they can continue to do that, I think we can get an end to this thing. And the president may be well on his way to those when he wants to, when the Lord decides it's his time to the pearly gates.
It's pearly gates. All right, guys, up next, Democrats.
We got to give it to that guy, man. He's probably one of the only liberal Democrat that has, common sense. He's, probably the only one. Okay. All right, here we go. Yes. Molly Miller says special set of skills. Yes, the movie Taken. That was the line right there. When his daughter was taken, and it was like, I have a special set of skills. If you let my daughter go now, I would not look for you. I will not hurt you, but if you do not let her go, I will find you, and I will unalive you.
Campaigning for criminals? That's the focus of tonight's angle. As Donald Trump's team is busy rounding up dangerous illegals, liberal city mayors are busy serenading them.
Pastoreaba de vuelta, pues el sol se está ocultando, va subiendo por la cuesta.
Yeah, you saw that. A live mariachi band playing outside Boston City Hall today. This is Boston Mayor Michelle Wu's soundtrack du jour. She's playing into stereotypes. Now, imagine what they'd be saying if conservatives used a certain cartoon character to describe how fast illegals scatter when ICE shows up at a Home Depot. They banned that cartoon. But leftists like Mayor Wu, of course, they're oblivious to all these double standards. They don't care how their policies impact the lives of law-abiding Americans. So when the federal deadline arrived for her to turn over info about their illegal population for the White House, well, what was her answer?
The U.S. Attorney General asked for a response by today. So here it is. Stop attacking our cities to hide your administration's failures. Unlike the Trump administration, Boston follows the law. And Boston will not back down from who we are and what we stand for.
Wu won't budge. And what exactly do they stand for, by the way? These aren't patriots dumping British tea into the Boston Harbor. They're Marxists dumping dangerous illegals onto our streets. The safety of our citizens be damned. They don't care. So whose interests are Michelle Wu and Maura Healey, the governor, really representing? Through June of this year, 1,500 illegal aliens were arrested in Massachusetts, including rapists and kidnappers. Like these award winners. Marcelo de Leon Yoke, an illegal from Guatemala, an accused child rapist. Then there was Kebler Lasso from Ecuador, convicted for soliciting murder. Oh, that's all. Then this freak, Luciano Pereira de Oliveira, who came here illegally from Brazil, he was arrested for child rape and child porn. And let's not forget Jose Lopez Martin, charged with assault with a deadly weapon from Guatemala. Now, these types of sadistic demons are shielded by the insane laws that leftist crusader Michelle Wu happily invokes. Now, this is the way it works in Warp, Massachusetts. State law and court precedent forbid authorities from holding suspects solely based on immigration status once those suspects have posted bail. As a result, well, cocaine and fentanyl trafficking suspects, they've been released before ICE even arrives. Child rapists have been released to home confinement. The stories I was reading about today, they're infuriating. And among the most pro-criminal mayors in America, Wu, I think she has to be now in the top 3. It's heinous. Instead of giving ICE the data that it needs to make arrests, she's actually demanding information from the federal government.
Back in June, the city of Boston filed a Freedom of Information request with ICE, demanding the bare minimum of transparency from our federal government. We're prepared to take additional legal steps if they continue to refuse transparency.
Okay, Michelle, nice try. Now, is this really what the good people of Boston voted for? This is what you want? Do they really want more illegals hiding in plain sight? Like this Haitian illegal with 17 priors who was picked up by ICE earlier this year.
I'm not going back to Haiti. Trump, you feel me? Yo, Biden forever, bro.
Yo, Biden forever, bro. That's who Michelle Wu is standing up for. And I have to ask this, what's happened to New England? I came from Connecticut. I grew up there. It was a great place to grow up. But I hardly recognize the place. I also spent a lot of time in Maine, where they've apparently totally lost their minds. The folks in Old Orchard Beach, Maine, just hired a Jamaican illegal who has a Massachusetts driver's license, get this, to be a police officer. So a guy who chose to live outside the law, now telling legal Maine residents, citizens, oh, I'm going to enforce the law. It's total madness. He was arrested by ICE and has agreed to voluntarily leave the country. Remember, most liberals would be fine if all 20 million illegals were voting here as well. It's not just about money or crime, it's about the votes. Why else would not having Gavin be against voter ID requirements?
We're going to see the National Guard federalized in other parts of the country. You're starting to see that under different circumstances, subtly in D.C. But you're going to see ICE and Border Patrol sent out to polling places and voting booths during the election.
Voting booths. He that doth protest too much. Now, this is a curious campaign strategy when you really think about it. For all the Democrats, fighting for criminal illegal aliens and their right to stay here, fighting against law enforcement and their duty to arrest the worst of the worst.
If these sanctuary politicians won't follow the law, then we will be forced to flood the zone. We're hiring more than 10,000 new ICE enforcement officers. We have about 110,000 applications. So we're going to have the workforce to do that.
10,000 more. We need them. So although the sanctuary insanity is a threat to public safety, and boy, it is, it's also politically a gift to Republicans. Democrats just can't help themselves. They can't stop actively rewarding illegal aliens. Now, young minority students in Chicago, think of this. They may not have access to certain college scholarships, but undocumented Democrats, they're in luck. Thanks to Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, a non-citizen student who has not obtained a lawful permanent residence shall be eligible for financial aid and benefits. Shall be. Well, by contrast, the Trump administration is looking out for you. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has just revoked 6,000 student visas due to allegations of assault, terrorism, and terrorism support, DUI, and burglaries. Good for him. And better for American education, which should be first and foremost for American citizens. It's time to end the foreign student scam, especially students from countries whose values are in direct conflict with our own. So tonight, I see this in cities like Boston and Chicago, D.C., even in deep blue California. Gavin will be surprised to think ordinary people are starting to ask, who's really protecting us? And that's the angle. All right, coming up, was D.C. cooking the books to lower the crime?
70,000 monks just broke their vows of silence to nominate Trump for the Nobel.
Dear Mr. President Trump, we are standing here today with hearts full of appreciation. Today, 70,000 Cambodian Buddhist monks are wholeheartedly supportive of our Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Manet to nominate you for the Nobel Peace Prize. Please accept, Mr. President.
70,000 monks can't be wrong. After Trump brokered a peace deal between Cambodia and Thailand, the monks went ultra MAGA and shaved their heads like Stephen Miller. So 47's thinking about sending them all 70,000 of them Trump 2028 hats, duty and tariff-free. Zelensky and Macron went home yesterday with hats that said 4 more years. Just like when you visit a museum, Trump brought them to the gift shop right before they hit the door. Putin wanted a hat too, but instead Melania gave him a letter that said, "Stop killing kids." And Trump buzzed them with B-2s.
Alaska was a show of force by President Trump. He invited President Putin to land that the Russians used to own. He displayed a huge amount of military hardware and then did a flyover. It was kind of like inviting your uncontrollable neighbor to your house and showing him your gun case.
Trump's giving everybody options, the easy way or the hard way. This time, Zelensky picked the easy way. He wore a suit, said his thank yous, and brought Trump a big, beautiful gift, a putter from a Ukrainian soldier who lost his legs in a war and then picked up golf. Engraved on the head, "Let's putt peace together."
Konstantin, first of all, I just watched your swing. I know a lot about golf, and your swing is great. It looks beautiful, and you're going to be a very good golfer very soon. But I also want to thank you for this putter. It's beautiful. And it's made with real love, and it's given to me with real love from you, and I appreciate that. Every time I sink a putt, I'll be thinking about you.
Maybe the president will bring his new putter to Doral, where the PGA just announced Trump's club will host a tour event. The Europeans already calling it Daddy Shack. Yesterday, they were on their best behavior. Trump kept calling France's president by his first name, Emmanuel. And Macron responded with a "Mr. President." He was, quote, like a schoolboy speaking to his teacher. That's how President Trump likes his allies to behave. And although the leaders were still meeting as this column went to press, he appears to have whipped them into shape. The Europeans were sitting around the Resolute desk yesterday like they were waiting for class to start. Trump was giving Europe a geography lesson. He even put up the big, beautiful map and sent it home with Zelensky as homework. Now, if Zelensky can read a map like Trump can read a putt, we'll have a deal in no time. The last president to save Europe from Russian aggression was Reagan. and his portrait was staring them down in the Oval. Compare that to Trump's first term, when Europe and Merkel were trying to look down on him and tell him he was wrong. Now Europe realizes he was right about everything, and they're the ones doing the listening. Even Obama's guys are admitting 47's in control.
Whoever had the idea to bring all these European leaders together, in addition to President Zelensky, that was a brilliant, brilliant idea.
Donald Trump didn't make Europe feel too comfortable. When it was time to get down to business and call Putin, he kicked them out of the room.
I didn't do it in front of them. I thought that would be disrespectful to President Putin. I wouldn't do that because they have not had the warmest relations. And actually, President Putin wouldn't talk to people from Europe. I mean, that was part of the problem.
CNN is now whining that Zelensky had to wait in the hallway.
The fact that he feels he's got to check in with Putin right away still feels like Trump needs Putin's approval in a way that's got to be very disturbing to Zelensky sitting there.
This isn't CNN's first rodeo. They should know the first time Putin and Zelensky talk should be face-to-face, not on speakerphone. And what? Trump's not supposed to call Vlad to set up the next round of talks? Who else is he going to call? Obama talked to Putin. Hillary talked to Putin. Biden even talked to Putin. How are you supposed to end the war if you don't talk to the guy who started it? CNN tried to get the Finns to leak another perfect phone call.
Do you know what Trump said to Putin on the phone? I mean, what were the specifics that he put out there?
Obviously, in diplomacy, what happens in the Oval Office stays in the Oval Office when the media is not in there. I've been involved in peace mediation before, and I think that President Trump is genuinely trying to bring this war to an end.
Trump says, if you're curious, I'll tell you.
We had a very good call, and I told him that we're going to set up a meeting with President Zelensky, and you and he will meet. And then after that meeting, if everything works out, okay, I'll meet and we'll wrap it up. But, it takes, in this case, two to tango. They have to have somewhat of a relationship. Otherwise, we're just wasting a lot of time. I don't want to be doing that I just want to end it.
The White House says Putin's agreed to meet Zelensky one-on-one. Could happen within the next few weeks. And they're shopping around for a site. Budapest is now the front runner. But Switzerland making a last-second play, promising not to arrest the Russian leader on war crimes. How diplomatic. But Obama's right-hand woman, Susan Rice, says Trump doesn't understand the art of the deal.
Russia interfered in the 2016 election by disinformation campaigns. And rather than put the sort of pressure on Putin and Russia, he is rolling out the red carpet, doing military flyovers, giving him a ride in the presidential limousine.
Rice thought buzzing Putin with B-2s was an honor. That was a flex. And why not get to know each other in the Beast? 41 flew VAD on Marine One, took him to Kennebunkport to meet with his son. They rode up and down the Maine coast on the family's Fidelity 3. Could you imagine if Trump took Putin to Bedminster and played a round of golf? Picking up the phone isn't even close to that. Rice's commander-in-chief wrote love letters to the Ayatollah. Did that stop the Iranians from nuking up? No. Hillary gave the Russians a reset button. Did that stop the Russians from invading Ukraine? No. The Democrats can sit this one out. Trump's just fixing the left's mess.
From the beginning of this entire process, much of the left-wing media has been actively rooting against the President of the United States in the pursuit of peace. All weekend following those historic U.S.-Russia bilateral talks, we listened to clueless pundits on television trying but failing to claim that the president had failed. The so-called experts in the foreign policy establishment, whose record is nothing but endless wars, trillions of wasted taxpayer dollars, and dead Americans, have the nerve to try and lecture President Trump, who has solved 7 global conflicts in 7 months.
Trump stopping wars that started on Democrats' watch. Even the monks get it. Even Democrats like Stephen A. get it.
It was Biden in office when a full-fledged war against Ukraine took place. It was Russia that invaded Crimea, and that was under the Obama administration. It was Clinton in office when you made a deal that disarmed the Ukraine and therefore weakened them, leaving them dependent on the United States. What I'm saying is promises made are supposed to be promises kept.
What was Joe Biden's plan to win the war in Ukraine? He didn't have one. What was Biden's plan to end the war in Ukraine? He didn't have one. If Kamala won, did she have a strategy? Of course not. The Europeans just don't want to be next on Putin's menu. And that makes sense. But now that Trump made Europe foot the bill for the war, they're like, all right, let's call it a day. After their meeting yesterday, they told Trump at the table, great talk. We'll see you in a month or two.
They said a month or two? You're going to have another 40,000 people dead in a month or two. You have to do it tonight.
The Obama-Biden doctrine of strategic patience, a.k.a. don't change anything, just got doged. Trump doesn't have time for shenanigans. And if you look at the body count, neither does Ukraine. You can see why the president has the wind at his back. Trump's approval rating's been surging. Insider Advantage has him up 8 points since July. But Trump's not making peace for politics or for the Nobel Peace Prize, maybe just a little. He's doing it because he wants to walk through the pearly gates.
I want to try and get to heaven if possible. I'm hearing I'm not doing well. I hear I'm really at the bottom of the totem pole. But if I can get to heaven, this will be one of the reasons.
When Trump got shot in the head in Butler, it changed him. He believes God saved his life to keep him on earth, to put America first and stop the killing. And deep down, Trump knows he's been a little bit of a bad boy. So ending the Ukraine war is going to go a long way with the big guy upstairs. Good acts like ending wars don't automatically get you into heaven. As my good friend Harold Ford Jr. says, you also have to love your neighbor as you love yourself and love your Lord with all of your heart. So Trump is this close. I'm sure he's in. And we all know God loves song, and so does the president. In between brokering bilaterals, he's testing out the speaker system on the brand new White House patio.
And welcome to Hannity. And tonight, huge breaking news. The Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, will join us after stripping 37 security clearances from anti-Trump operatives who are weaponizing the intel community. Our indictments possibly far behind. Also later tonight, Stephen Miller. He will try and analyze the Democratic Party's descent into utter lawlessness and theatrics. Take a look.
El flautín.
All right, a mariachi band at a press conference to protest deportations. Only the party that puts the so-called rights of illegal immigrants over your safety and your family's safety and security can come up with that one. Also, a serious question. Can the Democratic Party get any worse? Our good friend Stephen A. Smith calling out his own party. I think he's finally getting Hannitized for their horrific record. Take a look.
It was Biden in office when a full-fledged war against Ukraine took place, courtesy of Russia's instigation, no matter what they try to say to Trump. It was Russia that invaded Crimea, and that was under the Obama administration. It was Clinton in office when you made a deal that disarmed the Ukraine and therefore weakened them, leaving them dependent on the United States.
He's riled up. Our buddy Stephen A. Smith will join us in just a moment. But our first guest is someone who, frankly, does not get enough credit from America's so-called journalists, the state-run legacy media mob. He's been flying all around the world, trying to bring peace to the Middle East and to Europe. When it comes to tough negotiations around the world, there's perhaps no one better at this than Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff. Now, prior to the Alaska summit, Witkoff was diligently negotiating in Russia with Putin behind the scenes personally to try and carve out common ground prior to Alaska. Alaska, while also personally delivering President Trump's message to Russia. Witkoff is getting results. The Alaska summit, in spite of what the media mob would tell you, it was a huge success. If it wasn't, then why would Zelensky, NATO leaders, European leaders, why would they fly all the way across the pond on a day's notice and meet with President Trump at the White House? No other world leader is capable of pulling any of this off but Donald Trump. And it perfectly embodied the president's core strategy of peace through strength. In the end, it will be the two sides in this conflict. It's going to be Putin, it's going to be Zelensky, it's going to be Russia, it's going to be Ukraine, and it will be Europe that determine the final outcome. But for the first time in 3 years, there is hope that the death, the dying, the destruction may stop. If not, President Trump said there will be severe consequences for Vladimir Putin and Russia, and depending on how long it continues, Ukraine, it may no longer exist. Not good for anybody. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said it this way. Take a look.
I want to set the record straight on what went on in Alaska. Alaska was a show of force by President Trump. He invited President Putin to land that the Russians used to own. He displayed a huge amount of military hardware and then did a flyover. It was kind of like inviting your uncontrollable neighbor to your house and showing him your gun case.
All right, so thanks to the president's leadership, the world finally has a chance at peace. That's all liberals, all we're saying is give peace a chance. You would think they'd be happy with Donald Trump tonight, but they're not. And the next steps are coming into focus. A bilateral meeting between Zelensky and Putin is now under consideration. Another option, a trilateral meeting between the pair and President Trump. That is also a possibility. In my strong but humble opinion, that would be the best option for peace. I think we probably need someone to be a referee in that room, or Putin and Zelensky may kill each other. Now, the rest of Europe, they shouldn't get a seat at the table. As per usual, the EU has grossly mismanaged this regional crisis well before a single shot was ever fired. In fact, they have been funding Putin's war machine for decades. Take a look at your screen. Now, prior to Putin's invasion of Ukraine, several European countries were buying 100% of their energy, the lifeblood of every country's economy, from Russia. Even major European powers like Germany were sending tens of billions of dollars to Vladimir Putin. He's supposed to be their, quote, enemy. He's the one they're afraid of. In Trump's first term, Europe defied his warnings. They doubled down on stupid, building more pipelines and more pipelines into Russia while shuttering their own energy facilities. And according to reports, even several years into the war, Europe was still sending Putin around $22 billion for Russian energy. In other words, they were funding Putin's war on their own continent while begging the U.S. to send more cash, more weapons to Ukraine. Thankfully, President Trump is putting an end to all this madness, hopefully an end to the killing. And of course, we still do not know when or even a peace agreement can be reached here. Putin is not someone you can trust, but with possible land swaps, European security guarantees for Ukraine, we have never been closer to a resolution. We've got a shot here. And it's all possible because of President Trump. He made peace a priority. Look at all the countries he has played a role in bringing peace to around the globe. Time and time again, he is sending the right people to negotiate. He squeezed Putin with a massive EU-U.S. energy trade deal, nearly $1 trillion, and harsh new tariffs against purchasers of Russian oil like India, along with a new weapons deal for Ukraine. Okay, Vladimir, we'll let them buy the weapons if this is what you want. And it was President Trump that rallied NATO states in Europe to more than double their defense spending for NATO. That is how Donald Trump got Vladimir Putin's attention. And despite all of this, the media mob and the Democratic Party, they have been openly rooting for failure, even mocking President Trump for trying to restore peace. And today, the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt issued this very forceful response. Take a look.
From the beginning of this entire process, much of the left-wing media has been actively rooting against the President of the United States in the pursuit of peace. Diplomacy is a delicate process, and instead of reporting the facts about what is happening here at this White House and what is happening between this president and other leaders around the world, many outlets in this room continue to try to actively undermine the president and sabotage the efforts towards peace.
Well said. In reality, most of the so-called journalists and the media mob, they're totally clueless.
for coming. The buffet closes in 15 minutes, and we're out of shrimp. Happy Tuesday, everyone. So this week, our very own Bret Baier got pulled over by a cop in D.C. Well, he always did want to be a rapper. President Trump joked that ending the war in Ukraine could help boost his odds of getting into heaven. He added that he's already drawn up plans to help St. Peter renovate the pearly gates. The Democratic Party's finances are in trouble after spending $15 million to pay off Kamala's campaign. But at least they'll get half of that back in bottle returns. RFK Jr. squared off against Pete Hegseth in a pull-up and push-up contest. Unfortunately, they both had their asses kicked by this dude.
Hate to see that.
Star Wars actor Mark Hamill revealed he wanted to flee the U.S. after Trump was elected a second time. Unfortunately, though, he couldn't get anyone to cover his shift at Arby's. As part of the Trump administration's ongoing crime crackdown, 52 people were arrested in D.C. in a single night. And 51 were migrants in the same car.
Wow.
In an interview, former MSNBC host Joy Reid said white men haven't invented anything. Kudos to her. Kudos to her for her first admission to date that Africans invented slavery. I don't even know.
Can't have it both ways.
Can't have it both ways. A Danish woman donated her daughter's pony to the local zoo to be fed to lions.
Oh, dear.
Authorities intervened when they realized it wasn't a pony at all, but a confused and very lost Sarah Jessica Parker. So glad they caught her in time. Oh, the zoo animals were so relieved.
Rough meat.
And finally, Playboy is moving its headquarters to Miami Beach and opening a new club. Yeah, it's like... It's like Christmas in August, said one man. Hey.
And that
guy. Bill Clinton up there. So according to the New York Times, Trump's words may have the greatest influence on English of any president ever. But to them, of course, this could be harmful. To which I say, so can reading your garbage paper. The piece was titled The Insidious Creep of Trump's Speaking Style. Insidious Creep, which also was the code name the Chinese used for Eric Swalwell. The writer says, quote, Mr. Trump's ideas begin as ridiculous and are easily parodied on the internet. They're already affecting our headspace. The fact that we're talking like Trump could mean that we're starting to think like him as well. Typical liberal. But he should have ended that quote with, thank you for your attention to this matter. It would have worked. Prove your points. True, Trump is no Kamala Harris when it comes to the English language. He prefers to use it, not dismember it and bury it in the backyard. And is it better to talk like Joe Biden, who hasn't shown brain activity since they slipped Adderall into his pudding? Who could forget his classics like, not a joke? Or, anyway, here's the deal. And the phrase he used most, ow. But Trump, he's different. I wonder, does he want to get to heaven if possible?
I want to try and get to heaven if possible. I'm hearing I'm not doing well. I hear I'm really at the bottom of the totem pole. But if I can get to heaven, this will be one of the reasons.
Last month, I signed one big, beautiful bill, and he takes the fat shot drug. I'm in London, and I just paid for this damn fat drug I take. I said, it's not working. They want transgender for everybody transgender. That's beautiful. This is a different panel than I've had. Everything's computer.
Everything everything's computer. We get that. It's not surprising his vocab is popular because he is. Using his own words, Trump's policies are beautiful. The Dems are a total disaster, and Rosie O'Donnell is huge. He's easily understood and uses words a high school dropout understands. It's why cab drivers and Jesse Waters love him. But it makes me wonder, has the New York Times ever done a piece on how the left twists language into an appealing cover for their dreadful ideas? I mean, what's worse, blunt honesty or this dishonest muck?
We talked about racial and economic justice, racial and social justice. We started to really extend those issues to the issues of economic justice, environmental justice, and the intersectionality and interconnectedness of all our fights.
Climate change is having a disproportionate effect on the physical and mental health of Black communities. I've often said that gender-affirming care is health care. It is mental health care.
She will be the first Black woman, the first out LGBTQ+ person to serve in this role.
The cabinet is majority people of color for the first time in history. The cabinet is majority female for the first time in history. The majority of White House senior staff identify as female. 40% of White House senior staff identify as part of racially diverse communities. A record 6 assistants to the president are openly LGBTQ.
I am Kamala Harris. My pronouns are she and her. I am a woman sitting at the table wearing a blue suit.
Not anymore, Kamala. Now you're a woman laying down in a corner booth at Chili's. And your pronouns are and faced. It's the shared code of overeducated brains using jargon to hide nefarious intent. There are people who start their sentences with "so" and finish with a smug smile and folded arms, just like they invented fire at that moment. But Trump's the opposite. He's direct, honest, and fun. 3 things the Democratic Party isn't and can't be. Trump's one of the greatest cultural figures in American history. We quote Reagan and Lincoln to this day, but we quote movies too, like Animal House, Die Hard, The Terminator. True, Joy Behar says, "I'll be back" every time she leaves Golden Corral. And how many times in the last 4 years have we quoted the brat in The Sixth Sense saying, "I see dead people"? Trump can't help that he resonates. The media hates hearing about fake news, but that wasn't a thing before Trump. He coined it, calling attention to the legacy media's shameful bias and agenda. And now the media is pretty much dead. His words start movements. Meanwhile, the only movement Biden starts are of the bowel variety. Drain the swamp, make America great again. We're all verbal tools in the fight against corruption. Meanwhile, Obama said, "Let me be clear." But the only thing clear about him was his fear of being slapped around by Michelle. The most famous thing Bill Clinton said was, "I did not have sexual relations with that woman." Well, that and nice jet, Jeffrey. Others try to mimic Trump's style, but they don't have the honesty behind it. Gavin Newsom hired a team of dorks to copy Trump's way of tweeting, and they came off as insincere as his wedding vows. Trump is... It could have been worse. Trust me.
I know. That's why I'm laughing.
I pulled back for legal reasons.
Good for you.
Trump is consequential. He's reshaped trade relations, closed the border, is ending wars. That's why his phrases stick and why the other guys get less attention than Rashida Tlaib on Valentine's Day. Oh. His success is the only reason you end up with articles like these. They can't stand that he's president and that his words matter. They can inspire, make us laugh, or like me, get you a lifetime ban from Wheel of Fortune. I mean, how was I supposed to know it was "I love big decks"? Honest mistake. Let's welcome tonight's guest, the The biggest laugh he ever got was asking for a prenup. Actor, writer, and comedian Jamie Lissow. She proved the pen is mightier than the sword with her horrible sword fighting. Editor-in-chief of the Federalist, Molly Hemingway. In high school, she was voted most likely to slip through a storm drain. New York Times bestselling author and Fox News contributor Cat Too. And he's the only man on earth strong enough to carry all of Kill Me's hate mail. New York Times bestselling author, comedian, and former NWA World Champion What do you make of it? Jamie, I get the feeling that they're running out of things to criticize Trump for. It's kind of like me with you.
Yeah.
You know, I've just beaten everything to death, and I'm kind of getting bored with your horrible life. They're like, they can't, now they're going after his, the fact that people are imitating him.
You're right. It's weird you said you were out of insults, and then you did a bunch of them.
That's true.
I think
maybe I'm not done.
Yeah, for real. And I think it boils down to Trump being a real, accessible person. Like, look at all his awesome, I love all the like, make America great again, right? We understand what it means. It's very simple. It makes sense. It's what we all want. Drain the swamp, which, by the way, when I was with my ex-wife, she only let me drain the swamp like once a year on my birthday.
You love irrigation.
I do. But just like, I don't know, just like everything, though, even like how you just showed the clip where he's like the fat shot. Yeah. We all know what he's talking about.
Yes.
If you say Ozempic, I'll bet Trump doesn't go to the urologist. He goes to the dick guy.
Telling you, cops and the mob love him for that reason. It's incredible. So, Molly, they're basically saying that they worry people are turning into him. That is a very liberal way of thinking, that somehow we're like malleable and that like, oh, we will just fall in line like they do when they hear words.
Well, it's also just like amazing that it's the year 2025 and they have just gotten around to realizing that Trump has a unique speaking style that people ape. Like nothing gets past the New York Times, right?
Yes.
But yeah, I think people have learned to really appreciate, I mean, to be totally honest, some people hate his speaking style, some people love it, but it's always fun to imitate, and it does not mean that doesn't mean that you're accepting everything about what he's saying.
And it's nowhere near as bad as dishonesty.
Right.
When you listen to the way the left uses language, which is academic inspired, it all comes from academia, these schools of revolutionary thought, they have kids talking like robots.
Oh yeah, and like, they loved the way President Obama spoke, and President Obama the way he spoke was sort of designed to deceive, and Trump, so straightforward. You know exactly what he's thinking. He's easily the best communicator since Reagan that we've had in presidential
That's why I think
office.
if they ever do a remake of 48 Hours, it has to be with Trump and Obama. You know? Because you reverse it like the black guy's uptight, and the white guy's, well, that's more like Lethal Weapon.
Right.
Yeah. I'll get on that tomorrow. Have to buy a lot of Molly, though. Hey, Kat. I don't know what I meant by that. I meant, not that. I meant the drug. It's kind of funny that the way he talks is a big deal. I mean, we know people who talk like this. Why is it a big deal?
It's not really. It's not really a big deal. And this whole piece that's, oh, people talk like Trump, could it mean we're starting to think like him? That's how the piece ended. And I kept scrolling down to see the rest of it.
Yes.
I'm like, when are you going to explain why you think that? Because you can find that that's not true just by going outside and talking to a person.
Right.
The most progressive friend that I have, very progressive, like Mamdani progressive, I routinely send him clips of Trump's being funny. The everything's computer one I've sent him. The transgender for everybody transgender. I sent that to him last week, and he replies, ha, 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 ha. I hate that he's so funny.
Yeah.
But he acknowledges that he's funny. People talk like him because it's funny. I've been quoting Happy Gilmore for 25 years. That doesn't mean I start thinking about throwing golf clubs at people.
Yeah.
It's funny. You can't eat, and it says nothing about his policies. My friend hates his policies, but he can't deny that he's hilarious.
Yeah, you know, Tyrus, Gavin Newsom thinks that nobody understands that he's imitating Trump. Like when he's doing this, it's like, we get that you're trying to imitate Trump or that your writers are doing it. It's still lame because when you're absurd, you can't mock absurdity.
Well, Gavin Newsom is, he just all around sucks.
Yeah.
He's just, you got to be good at something.
Yeah. You got to be good at something.
You got to,
What is, there's
clearly
not one
the governor thing ain't his thing.
Yeah.
Telling the truth is tough. So maybe he was going to be a good comedian, because that's what happens to a lot of people. Acting doesn't work out, then they go into politics, and he's like, hey, I'll be a comedian. Turns out, sucks at that too. So I don't know. Maybe try carpentry. I don't know. But what it is if you can't stop the message, you have to attack the sound, right? Because that's what they're doing. President Trump, I believe he was rated out as he had as a 6th grade speaking level. And I guess that was supposed to be a sick burn.
Yeah.
But when I have a couple of 6th graders, and I think they speak a lot better than they did in the 5th grade. But what you understand is that a 6th grader, or that level of speaking, that means a line cook understands what you're saying, and a scientist understands what you're saying. So what their problem is not that what he says is that anyone from any walk of life understands his message.
And that's scary.
And that sucks for them, because they can't do that. Perfect example. AOC didn't really know what she was saying.
Yeah.
That's why she kept repeating it.
Yeah.
Because if you knew what economic racism really meant, you could probably say something else besides economic racism is racism economically, which is affecting us all economically, which then henceforth is why we're all dealing with this racial economical frustration that is America.
For a minute there, I thought we had Eric Michael Dyson on the show. Or what
Exactly. He's the same.
Michael Dyson.
He made a whole career of saying verbs.
And
nothing else.
Yes.
And that's what they do.
What's his name?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, Michael Eric Dyson or whatever. He would just say.
And then just throw white people, racism, and then they would put him on TV.
They go, you are so smart.
Yeah, because they're afraid of him.
Yeah.
Because they don't really know what he said.
Yeah. And you're not
with
going to
Trump,
ask.
you know what he says. You'll never have anyone say, I just spoke to the president and I have no idea what he said.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.
Joining me now right here on set is Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Mr. Secretary, thank you. Appreciate you coming here.
Larry, always good to see you.
This is a little different studio. Don't be alarmed. It's still the Kudlow Show on Fox Business. All right. CPI, great numbers today. The experts, most of them proven wrong.
Larry, not only were they fantastic numbers, is that a lot of the economists said, well, I got the number right, but I missed the components. And everyone was expecting that there would, as you just said, that there would be goods inflation, but there was actually this very odd service inflation. There was some healthcare services. There were airline prices, which, as far as I can tell, has nothing to do with tariffs. I'm starting to think TDS used to mean tariff derangement syndrome. Now it's kind of turning into tariff Domkopf syndrome. I mean, they just, when you're in a hole, stop digging.
Yes, I agree. Stocks are booming. Your 10-year note is 429. It's basically held stable nicely. Can you get Steve Myron in the Fed confirmed by the Senate in time for the FOMC meeting next month?
We'll see. That's going to be up to Leader Thune and the banking committee. So we'll see. I'm hopeful that he can be, and he's going to be a great voice. I've known Stephen a long time, and he's thoughtful, methodical, and has a lot to say about the Fed.
I think I think that his appointment, as I said in the riff, I believe sincerely makes Jay Powell a lame duck. And if nothing else, changes the whole center of gravity of the Federal Reserve Board. in terms of policy, much less politics. But let's leave the politics aside. In terms of policy, Jay Powell's been hanging on. Nobody really understands why. Nobody knows what his models are. There's no transparency. Steve Myron, you're right, he's a smart chap. He was your guy for CEA. Now you're putting him on the Fed. I think it changes everything. And I think it does make Powell a lame duck.
Well, look, as you said, it's going to change the composition of the Fed. It's going to change the narrative. And now we've seen two things. We've seen with these big economic revisions, and I'm sure we'll come back and talk about poor quality of data, because if we'd had the original numbers, Fed could have been cutting in June, July. So I think the real thing now to think about is, should we get a 50 basis point rate cut in September to make up for the delay and the lack of data? And, again, back to these CPI numbers are fantastic.
Question, you're interviewing a bunch of Fed candidates now. Myron could stay on. You could renominate him if you wanted to.
He could. And Larry, the important thing to remember is we have two seats. So there's the seat for the chair, and then there will be another appointee joining. So we actually get two appointments, and President Trump will have a majority of the board in D.C.
Yes, indeed. So you're interviewing a whole bunch of candidates. There's a lot of talk about it. Chris Waller, Kevin Warsh, Kevin Hassett, and so forth, and other names. You're casting a wide net.
Very, very wide net. And as you know, more than anyone, President has a very open mind. He even considered reappointing Janet Yellen. So we want to see what everyone's thinking. It's not ideological. It's about economics, what's best for the American people, what's best for the economy. And as I talk to the candidates, I'm looking at three things: monetary policy, regulatory policy, and the ability to run and revamp the organization, because it's really gotten bloated. And I think that this bloat puts its monetary independence at risk.
Well, you've said, I think correctly, that the Fed needs an audit top to bottom. Now, you were referring to non-monetary policy. I would say to you, Mr. Secretary, you ought to include monetary policy. These models that suggest strong growth causes high inflation are outdated. If they ever work, they're 50 years out of date. I think you just need a thoroughgoing audit of the whole institution, the size of it, the reserve banks around the country, the staffing. I think I saw a chart. The Fed staffing overall is up 300% in recent years. This not exactly a Doge candidate.
Well, Larry, this is what happens when you have no accountability. So the Fed does not answer to Congress in terms of its budget. And I like to tell people President Trump is focused on the building and the problems at the building. I'm focused on the problems in the foundation. There's a foundational issue here.
Well, he said today, speaking of all that, he said today he's thinking about a lawsuit against Jay Powell. And he said that $3 billion of renovations for the three buildings all could have been done for $50 million. He knows a thing or two about this subject. You think he's going to bring a lawsuit?
I don't know, Larry.
Have you talked to him about it today?
I've been traveling today. I don't know about that, but what I do know is, I'm renovating my office at Treasury, and I'm paying for it personally. So that's the way we roll over at 1500 Pennsylvania.
I know that office quite well. Anyway, let's talk trade. China extended to November 10th, 2025. That's another 3 months, essentially. What are the key issues in the discussions with China, which you are leading?
Larry, China's like a multi-level chess game, because traditionally our biggest economic rivals have been our allies. So during 60s, 70s, 80s, even through the 90s, beginning of the aughts, our biggest economic rivals were the Europeans, Japanese, the Soviet Union up until the wall came down, was a military power but a small economy. And with China, we've never seen anything like this in modern times. It's our biggest economic rival and our biggest military rival. So we're solving for several variables here. What we are trying to do is to get to more balanced trade. President Trump wants the U.S. economy to rebalance towards more manufacturing. It's my belief, and most outside observers' belief, that the Chinese economy is the most unbalanced economy in modern times. They need to rebalance toward the consumer. So could we do that together? We've talked a lot about that. President Trump has an excellent relationship with Party Chair Xi, so that's very helpful. We'll be meeting with the counterparts again within the next 2 or 3 months, and we'll go from there.
President says he wants to meet with Xi.
President Xi has invited President Trump. We'll see. I'm not going to get out ahead of the president on that meeting.
Do you know when that will be?
Well, there's no date, Larry. The president hasn't accepted yet.
Okay, I get it. You don't want to talk about that. Rare earth magnets, can you make a deal on that? That's really an important economic and national security issue, rare earth magnets. It's come to that.
Well, we do have a deal on that, and that's been the nature of the talks on a big subject of the talks.
Have they opened it up? Is it flowing now to the U.S.?
It is flowing. It is flowing. But that was what we were talking about in Geneva, in London, in Stockholm. And the other thing we're doing is you will see the company called Mountain Pass that the U.S. government has taken a stake in. We're also working with 4, 5, 6, 7 other smaller companies to make sure that we can wean ourselves away from the dependency on China as a point of single failure for these rare earth magnets.
Do you think, I mean, I know it's hard, but in the next 3 months or